Chapter 1750. The moment Bu Fang's voice rang out, the atmosphere at the table changed in an instant. The 10 challengers could also be said to be 10 competitors. They competed with each other for the right to challenge the winner. The prize of chaotic energy deeply tempted them, making them unable to extricate themselves. Swish. So, the moment Bu Fang announced the start of the challenge, with lightning speed, they grabbed their spoons, held them tightly in their hands, and scooped the rice into the porcelain plate. It's not the stench. Master Jin Yong's eyes flickered. Although the divine pill was useless, he was still very confident in his own strength. In that case, he would complete the challenge with his own strength. Viscount Ash and Daoluan had the same idea. Of course, the others also grabbed their spoons in an instant. In front of them was a bowl of rice. The rice was drizzled with crimson curry. There were also chili residue in the curry, which exuded an alluring taste. Compared with yesterday's stench, today's curry looked more alluring. It seems that there will be a lot of people who will complete the challenge today. Many people had the same thought. The projection array zoomed in. The curry rice was clearly displayed in front of him. The flowing crimson curry made many people feel an inexplicable desire. Slurp. The spoon fell and roughly scooped up a spoonful of rice. The sticky curry flowed down and fell on the table with a splash. This was a challenger, and he intended to finish it as soon as possible. He opened his mouth wide. He didn't even have the time to sniff. He just stuffed the curry rice into his mouth. The spoon collided with his teeth, and the rice grains flowed in his mouth. The sticky curry sauce covered his tongue and mouth. The moment he chewed, the challenger's body froze in an instant. The challenger was a saint of the great path expert. His hair was disheveled, and it hung loosely over his shoulders. At this moment, he froze. Not only him, but everyone around him froze as well, including Master Zhen Yong and the others. With his hands clasped behind his back, the corners of Bu Fang's mouth curved upward slightly as he squinted at the crowd. The surrounding audience also widened their eyes. Foxy, lying on Bu Fang's shoulder, was drooling again, and she was drooling. Little Grief, you, the noble lady, and the others all stretched their necks. There seems to be something strange. Why aren't they moving? Continue. This is only the first bite, there are still 99 more. Isn't it delicious? It's definitely not delicious. This chef doesn't play by the rules at all. The nobles chattered among themselves. Suddenly, the projection array captured the powerhouse with disheveled hair. The latter's lips moved a little. Then, his eyes widened and his disheveled hair stood up in an instant, shooting straight toward Tianji. Tears flowed out of her eyes. The hot tears rolled down her cheeks and landed on the table with a plop. He opened his mouth wide and grinned, gasping and inhaling violently, clutching his throat. His eyes looked as if they were about to spit fire. Water! He let out a hoarse roar, then grabbed the iced water on the table and poured a mouthful of it into his mouth. With a gulp, the water flowed down his throat. Along with the rice, he swallowed the water. Snot, tears, and sweat, the man's face had been soaked. He drank the iced water in one gulp. The ice water in the cup was filled up again. This is your first chance to drink water. Bu Fang glanced at the man and said lightly. Some people could eat spicy food and some could not. It depended on each person's constitution. For those who didn't know how to eat spicy food, this was probably a living hell. Even if one could eat spicy food, perhaps it would still be hell. The expert sniffled and closed his eyes tightly, tears streaming down his cheek. That sorrowful look seemed to have infected quite a few people. Is he so horrible? He's king saint of the great path. He cried because of the spiciness after just one bite. In fact, it was not only this expert. Many people around him were the same. There was even an expert whose face had turned purple from the spiciness. With a plop, he lay on the table and lay motionless. He had fainted because of the spiciness. Perhaps only by fainting could the burning pain be alleviated. He fainted because of the spiciness? It should be noted that the expert who fainted was a saint of the great path. Even the stargazy pie yesterday was not so horrible. At most, it could scare a lot of people away. Plop, plop. Not everyone could withstand this kind of spiciness. The spiciness spread to their cells, making them feel as if their bodies were burning. The heat, the boiling, the numbness of their tongues, and the tearing of their mouths. Mommy! One of the experts covered his mouth and began to wail bitterly. Crying could relieve the tearing pain. The peak god emperor expert grinned, snot and tears streaming down his face. He reached out a hand and wiped his mouth, removing the curry residue from the corner of his mouth. Then, he took a sip of water. Then, he wiped the tears from his eyes. Then, he exploded. Ah! I can't stand it anymore. With a clang, the peak god emperor rushed out of his seat. With a ripping sound, he tore his clothes. His whole body was red. He knelt on the ground, tears streaming down his cheeks. Then, he ran wildly into the distance. Silence. The nobles were dumbfounded. The nobles did not know what to say. Was it so horrible? These people were not hired by the chef. The nobles knew these challengers very well. But these people's expressions were too exaggerated. Master Zhen Yong thought that with his strength, he should be able to withstand this challenge. But he found that he was wrong. It was a spiciness that went deep into his bones. Compared with this spiciness, perhaps the stench was really a kind of happiness. 1 spoonful, he ate 2 spoonfuls. When the second spoonful entered his mouth, the spiciness rose again. Sizzle, Master Zhen Yong's face turned red. His mouth was full of rice, and his eyes were wide and bloodshot. He trembled as he reached for the glass of water. The cold touch seemed to exude a fatal temptation. Gulp. Finally, he could not help but take a sip. The ice-cold water rolled down his throat. It seeped into his heart and spleen. The scorching spiciness was extinguished by the ice water, which made him feel very comfortable. He had never thought that a sip of water could be so comfortable. But soon, Master Zhen Yong woke up from the intoxicating feeling. I can only drink 2 spoonfuls of this water. I've already taken 1 spoonful. If I drink another, I'll be eliminated. Hold on. I must hold on. He looked at the round rice grains in the bowl and the crimson curry. He had thought that this curry was nothing, but now he was laughing wildly like a demon. This was the 18 forbidden. This was the hell curry. The longest road they had walked was this chef's trick. Viscount Ash's pretty face was flushed, and her sexy red lips were already swollen. She was so sensitive to the spiciness that she found that she could not feel her lip. Viscount Daoluan had been trying to maintain his image, but after taking the first spoonful, he gave up. He burst into tears and grinned. The spiciness was very strong. But these people were still able to persevere to the end. The first spoonful eliminated almost half of them. 5 challengers chose to give up. There were still 5 challengers struggling to hold on. 3 of them took the first spoonful of water. The only ones who did not drink were Viscount Ash and Viscount Daoluan. Gulp. The nobles around him swallowed their saliva. Damn it. This is too scary. Many people didn't get to see the stink challenge yesterday, but today they finally got to see the 18 forbidden challenge. Every single one of them was shocked. Master Zhen Yong felt a little dizzy. He was old and could not compare to the young. However, he still had to hold on. He scooped up the spoon and looked at the curry rice on it. It was as if the curry rice had suddenly become 3 spoonfuls. Master Zhen Yong opened his mouth wide, feeling a burning sensation in his stomach. He swallowed it. The spoon went into his stomach. The rice and the spiciness entered his mouth at once. Beep, 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 Master Zhen Yong's ears seemed to be spewing hot air. He sat tight in his seat, his back straight, as if he was about to ascend to heaven. He resisted the urge to drink the water. With tears in his eyes, he took out the divine pill and squeezed it hard. With a crack, the divine pill was crushed into powder by him. Master Zhen Yong felt as if he were hallucinating. There seemed to be a hot beauty dancing in front of him, her waves undulating. Bam! Master Zhen Yong's eyes rolled back and he fell to the ground again. He was motionless and his face was flushed. Master Zhen Yong fainted from the spiciness. An uproar broke out in an instant. Many alchemists held their heads with a look of disbelief on their faces. How could this be? Even someone as powerful as Master Zhen Yong could not withstand 2 spoonfuls. Master Zhen Yong fell. There were only 3 contestants left. Spicy, spicy. One of them took the 4th spoonful. His body began to shake violently. At last he could not bear it any more. He grabbed the cup of water and gulped it down. The 2nd spoonful went into his stomach. He was eliminated. However, before Bufang could say that he was eliminated, the challenger fell straight to the ground. With a poochie sound, his face was completely covered by the curry rice. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched, and his heart skipped a beat. His face hurt just by looking at it. This guy is going to ascend to heaven, sure enough. Accompanied by a ghastly wail and wolf howl, the saint of the great path rolled and crawled as he fled into the distance. Challenge? This is going to kill me. At the dining table, it was a mess. However, there were still 2 challengers left. Bufang was slightly surprised. I can't believe there are still 2 contestants who can withstand the 18 hell curry. Viscount Daoluan's face was twisted, and his lips were swollen like sausages. Viscount Ash was in a better condition. However, her hair was disheveled, and her pretty face was twisted. Owner Bu, can we try it too? In the distance, a few nobles who were eager to try it asked Bufang. Bufang paused. He nodded and scooped up a portion of curry rice. He handed it to them. You're welcome to try it, Bufang said. The eyes of these nobles lit up. Each of them held a spoon. Many nobles came over and stared at the curry rice with wide eyes. Each of them had a spoon, and the crimson curry flowed down their throat. The nobles swallowed. It smelled spicy, but it was actually not very strong. However, the nobles looked at each other. Then, they stuffed the spoon into their mouth. The projection array zoomed in and captured the faces of these nobles. They were the same as the challengers. The bodies of these nobles stiffened. The next moment, their faces changed into a dozen expressions, and then they burst into tears. They squatted on the ground with their heads in their hands, and their cries were filled with despair. That kind of despair would make anyone who heard it cry and feel sad. Why did they choose to die? Why did they have to be curious? This scene made all the experts in all the districts around the projection formation suck in a breath of cold air. What a terrible dark cuisine! Viscount Daoluan is crazy. He tore off his clothes, gulped down a second mouthful of ice water, and ran away naked. At that moment, many noblewomen screamed. As Viscount Daoluan fled in panic, there was only 1 challenger left. Viscount Ash was still holding on. Her cheeks were pink and her lips were sexy, red, swollen, and shiny. At this moment, countless people were infatuated with her. She shoved the curry rice into her mouth, spoonful by spoonful. She stuck out her tongue and licked the rice. Bufang sucked in a cold breath. This woman is so scary. Rumble. As the curry rice was bottomed out, Viscount Ash's aura began to fluctuate rapidly, and waves of air kept surging out. Viscount Ash was breaking through. This scene shocked everyone present. A dish could help a person break through? How could a dish do something that many divine pills couldn't do? Oh! Viscount Ash's eyes were misty. She swallowed another mouthful of curry rice and suddenly clamped her legs together. Her forehead was dripping with sweat. The comfort in the spiciness was perhaps the essence of the 18 forbidden dish, rumble. Her aura seemed to have broken through a shackle. Many people widened their eyes. Because they found that the curry rice in Viscount Ash's plate was almost bottomed out. There were only 3 mouthfuls left. At this moment, Viscount Ash began to pant violently. Her neck, chin, and nose were all covered with sparkling and translucent beads of sweat. All the nobles were watching her. Could Viscount Ash succeed in this super hellish, insanely spicy 18-step curry rice? Chapter 1751. The projection array was showing the challenge in front of the restaurant. The scene of figures fleeing in panic was vividly displayed. The scene of a group of people scurrying away in a sorry state was vividly presented in the video. The horrified expressions on the onlookers' faces were also clearly displayed. Sol watched indifferently. She was fiddling with a black ball in her hand, in which the cold power of sin swirled. She was fiddling with a pitch-black sphere in her hand. Ice-cold sinful energy was flowing within it. She only sneered at Bufang's little trick. Her goal was to sit on the throne of Void City. No matter what that chef did, he could not stop her. How could a mere chef make Nethery surpass her? No matter what the chef did, he could not stop her. How could a mere chef make Nethery surpass her? No matter what that chef did, he could not stop her. How could a mere chef make Nethery surpass her? Not to mention a chef who was unpopular in Void City. Sol sat cross-legged, closed her eyes, and began to cultivate. She had to prepare for the big event that was about to take place. There were too many implications in the competition for the throne of Void City. The war between the Soul Demon universe and the primitive universe was very intense, and Void City had the ability to change this cosmic war. The war between the Soul Demon universe and the primitive universe was very intense, and Void City had the ability to change this cosmic war. As long as she sat on the throne, Void City would lean toward the Soul Demon universe. At that time, the balance of victory, which was in a state of anxiety, would tip completely in the Soul Demon universe's favor. There were many people who were paying attention to this challenge, but in fact there were not many. Marchioness Xiaoqiu, for example, paid no more attention to it after watching for a while. Although she did not know what Bufang's goal was, the restaurant was not her focus now. The competition between the cursed goddesses was getting more and more intense. Marchioness Xiaoqiu also had to choose a side. She did not choose Sol, but Hutu. She hated Sol, so she also hated Sol, who had grown up among them. Hutu always gave her an inexplicable sense of horror. As the competition became more intense, an invisible terror gradually enveloped their hearts. Perhaps it would not be long before the peace of Void City was broken. Both cursed goddesses were trying to test the Queen of Curses' bottom line. Once that was done, all kinds of means would be revealed. Perhaps when the time came, the experts of the primitive universe and the Soul Demon universe would appear in Void City and launch an unprecedented war. Viscount Ash gasped for breath. Her breasts were heaving up and down. She was sweating profusely, which made her look even more enchanting. Many people clenched their fists. Although it was just a challenge, these nobles were all immersed in it. He wanted to know the final result. It rose and fell along with Viscount Ash's emotions. Could he succeed in the challenge? Viscount Ash grabbed the spoon and slowly put it into her mouth. Everyone couldn't help but open their mouths wide. Smack! Viscount Ash swallowed it in one gulp. His entire body seemed to be on fire. That feeling was as if he was about to be burned. Gulp, gulp. Viscount Ash felt as if she was going to combust as she continued to cook. Every breath she exhaled was scorching hot. Gulp. He took a sip of ice water. She felt cold all over her body. The heat was extinguished and gave her the courage to continue eating. Bufang was very surprised. This woman's strength was beyond her expectations. Bufang knew that this dark cuisine could help him break through. However, he didn't expect that someone could really hold on until she finished eating. When Viscount Ash stuffed the last mouthful of curry into her mouth, the whole audience was boiling. The whole District A was in an uproar. The uproar went straight to the sky, and the noise seemed to be about to lift the roof off the roof. Ash! The nobles clenched their fists. They felt that Viscount Ash had helped them regain their dignity. Bufang nodded. This woman was indeed admirable. This was the 18 hell curry rice. Those who dared to challenge were warriors, and those who succeeded in the challenge were even more commendable. Master Zhen Yong opened his eyes and looked at Viscount Ash with a complicated look in his eyes. The challenge was successful. Viscount Ash drank the ice water wantonly. She needed to cool down. It took her several gulps in a row to suppress the heat in her body. She looked as if she had just been fished out of a pool, and her hot curves were outlined by her wet clothes, which made her look very charming. Owner Bu, I succeeded, didn't I? Viscount Ash asked, staring at Bufang with bright eyes. Her lips were slightly swollen and hot, which made her look even sexier. Bufang nodded. Congratulations! Today's challenge is over. Come with me to receive your reward. Bufang said. That gave many people pause. There's really a reward? The reward is chaotic energy? Is this chef for real? Viscount Ash's eyes lit up. Although her cultivation base had broken through during the challenge just now, the chaotic energy was still far away. As long as she had the chaotic energy, she would have found a way to break through to the chaotic saint realm. There were many chaotic saints in Void City. However, these saints of the Great Path and chaotic saints came from the countless surrounding universes. Some of them were the best of the best, and some were the geniuses of the universe. They came to Void City to seek an opportunity to break through. Master Zhen Yong's eyes lit up. He was very curious if Bufang could really take out the chaotic energy. Bufang packed up the stall. Today's challenge was over. But the stall would continue. Owner Bu, will you continue the challenge tomorrow? Someone asked. Bufang nodded and did not say anything. This time, he did not even reveal the name of the dark cuisine tomorrow. The challenge was over, but many people did not leave. Instead, more people gathered in front of the restaurant. Bufang stepped into the restaurant with Viscount Ash. Viscount Ash sat in a chair and looked curiously at the scene in the restaurant. She was about to get the chaotic energy and for some reason she was a little excited. If she could really get the chaotic energy, those challenges would be worth it. Wait a moment. Bufang glanced at Viscount Ash, then turned and stepped into the restaurant. Viscount Ash turned her eyes and rested them on you and the noblewoman. She quickly rose to her feet. Your Excellency, Your Excellency! She had not seen these two great figures before. You did a good job. You suppressed that little chef Bufang's arrogance, and did not bring shame to Void City. Duke Yunlan narrowed her eyes and smiled. Viscount Ash nodded excitedly. Sizzle in the kitchen, the sound of cooking rang out. Of course, Bufang could not produce the chaotic energy. However, with his current level of cooking, the dishes he cooked were enough to give the diners chaotic energy. This time, Bufang made a bowl of noodles. The broth was black. There were specks of starlight swirling in it. Swish! The slender noodles rolled up like dragon whiskers, flapping in the noodles. They looked like divine dragons soaring in the universe. The starry sky dragon whisker noodles are done. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. His hand shook. The churning noodles in the blue and white porcelain bowl quieted down immediately. It was an ordinary bowl of noodles with nothing special about it. Bufang asked Xiao Ai to bring the noodles to Viscount Ash through the window. Eyes wide, Xiao Ai walked carefully with the noodles in her hand, as if she was afraid that the broth would spill. Before long, she came in front of Viscount Ash. This is the Starry Sky Dragon Whisker Noodles. Owner Bu said it's your reward. Xiao Ai said. Viscount Ash's eyes couldn't help but fall on the bowl. This is the reward? I can get the chaotic energy with this? Viscount Ash frowned deeply. This black and sloppy bowl of noodles was the reward. Was it another dark cuisine? To be honest, Viscount Ash was a little scared now. She always felt that food was the so-called dark cuisine. It was so smelly that she had no friends. Dingling. In the kitchen, Bufang lifted the curtain and walked out. Wiping his wet palms with a white cloth, he said, "Have a taste. Have a taste. This is your reward," Yizichin said. Bufang said calmly. "Owner Bu, if it doesn't produce the chaotic energy, what will you do?" Viscount Ash narrowed her eyes, looking a little murderous. She didn't believe that a bowl of noodles could produce the chaotic energy. Outside the door, the nobles, who had been paying attention to the reward, were also stunned by Bufang's actions. He wanted to make Viscount Ash produce the chaotic energy with a bowl of noodles? This was a scam, wasn't it? Now, Master Zhenyong was glad that he did not insist. A bowl of noodles could produce the chaotic energy? He would not believe it even if he was beaten to death. As a top alchemist, he knew very well how rare the chaotic energy was. If Bufang had taken out some divine medicine of the universe, he would have been able to accept it. But Bufang had only taken out a bowl of noodles. "Sorry, I refuse." Many people were sneering. A bowl of noodles. Who were they kidding? The scene was transmitted to the whole Void City through the projection array. Almost everyone was sneering. Viscount Ash's face was unsightly. She felt as if these people were laughing at her. Eat it. Who knows, it might produce the chaotic energy. If there's no chaotic energy, I'll close my restaurant and smash the signboard myself. Bufang said lightly. He looked as calm as if he was talking about eating and drinking. In fact, this calmness showed Bufang's confidence. "All right." Viscount Ash narrowed her eyes. She sat down and picked up a pair of chopsticks. "A bowl of noodles. I want to see what this bowl of noodles can do." She grabbed the chopsticks and gently scooped up the noodles. It was as if a dragon's roar could be heard. A rich aroma wafted into her nostrils. Viscount Ash, who was used to smelling strange smells, lit up her eyes. She was actually hesitant to eat delicious food, because it would be a betrayal of her faith in the Queen of Curses. But for the sake of the chaotic energy, she had to try. Slurp. The noodles were cold but extremely slippery. The surface was actually ice cold, but incomparably slippery. With a suck, it directly drilled into his mouth. Her mouth, which had just finished eating the spicy curry, felt so comfortable as if a young girl's little hand was gently massaging her shoulders. Viscount Ash was intoxicated. She closed her eyes. The noodles were not ordinary noodles. It was as if each of them had turned into a corporeal divine dragon. She swallowed a mouthful of noodles. Viscount Ash closed her eyes. Her long, curly hair fluttered in the wind. It was as if she was riding on the back of a dragon, soaring in the boundless starry sky. The stars flew by rapidly, and the cool breeze that blew against her face calmed her heart, which was burning because of the spicy curry. It was too comfortable and satisfying. She couldn't extricate herself. Viscount Ash was deeply immersed in it. Suddenly Viscount Ash opened her eyes. There was nothing in the blue and white porcelain bowl. She was licking the porcelain bowl with her tongue. This shameful action caused her, who had just regained her senses, to stiffen. "What am I doing? How could I do such a shameful action?" Viscount Ash slowly retracted her tongue, and her face turned red. She had unknowingly finished the bowl of noodles. She was deeply intoxicated by the feeling of enjoying delicious food. She wished that it was a dream, but she didn't want to wake up. Boom! Suddenly Viscount Ash's eyes widened. Her red lips parted, and she let out a cry of surprise. In her body, an invisible aura that seemed to descend from the depths of the universe wrapped around her body like silk. Outside the door, the nobles who had been watching Viscount Ash were stunned. They only saw Viscount Ash holding the bowl of noodles and eating with relish. It was as if she was completely intoxicated and couldn't extricate herself. They couldn't help but feel a little hungry, but more people were glaring at her. Heresy! She was a heresy! A heresy who ate delicious food. Dark cuisine was fine, but gourmet food, that was heresy. However, before they could clamor and denounce her, a powerful aura erupted from Viscount Ash's body. A strand of primal chaos aura was born and wrapped around her body, continuously rumbling and collapsing the void. Everyone was stunned. The nobles were stunned. Master Jingyong, who was watching the show, was also dumbfounded. Chapter 1752. Chaotic Energy. It was a real, solid strike of chaos chi. It was incredible. It actually allowed Viscount Ash to possess the primal chaos energy. The appearance of this strand of primal chaos energy allowed Viscount Ash's strength to advance further from her original breakthrough. This time, she had become one of the top experts of Void City. One more step, and she would become a chaotic saint, an existence who could become an earl. A bowl of noodles had created an existence who could become an earl. Even Master Jingyong was stunned. The people in the city were stunned. They thought that Bufang would use some divine medicine to give Viscount Ash chaotic energy. After all, some divine medicines born in the depths of the chaotic universe had absorbed the essence of an entire universe, so it was normal for a saint of the Great Path to possess chaotic energy. The will of the universe was a supreme existence. However, Bufang did not. He had given Viscount Ash chaotic energy with just a bowl of noodles. Gulp. Many people involuntarily swallowed their saliva. They looked enviously at Viscount Ash, who was standing in the middle of the restaurant and surrounded by substantial chaos energy. Many people suddenly thought of a serious fact. If a bowl of noodles could allow Viscount Ash to possess chaotic energy, then, for a chef, it should be possible to create it many times. That meant Bufang could give many people chaotic energy. In a flash, everyone's eyes lit up. This included the audience watching the projection array. Everyone's breathing quickened. It was not difficult for them to think of this fact. After all, it was not difficult to guess. If that was the case, the so-called Queen's faith could not affect them at all. Benefits of this level were enough to drive them crazy. Abandoning their faith was a trivial matter for those who were exiled to Void City. If they completed the chef's challenge, they could get the food cooked by the chef. As soon as the idea appeared, it rose uncontrollably in their minds. In the restaurant, with his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang looked indifferently at Viscount Ash. Her aura kept skyrocketing, and wisps of chaotic energy swirled around her like clouds and mist. She was comprehending her improved strength and savoring the taste of the bowl of noodles. She had never imagined that her breakthrough would actually be carried out under such circumstances. She actually relied on the help of a chef to break through the bottleneck that had restricted her for tens of thousands of years. Snore. His aura sank. Viscount Ash looked at Bufang with a complicated and confused gaze. She used to trust the Queen of Curses so much that she thought chefs were all trash. The so-called delicacies might also be fake. But recently, a bowl of dragon whisker noodles had completely shattered her worldview. It turned out that delicacies were not that simple. The feeling of riding on the dragon's back and roaming in the starry sky deeply stimulated her mind. Viscount Ash opened her mouth, but she didn't know what to say. Are you done? Bufang looked at Viscount Ash and said with a faint smile, Then please leave, today's challenge is over. Oh, by the way, if you want to taste the restaurant's delicacies, please complete the challenge. Only those who complete the challenge will have the opportunity to taste the restaurant's delicacies. Bufang could not help but think of something. Previously, he just wanted to use the challenge to increase the restaurant's reputation and make it known throughout Void City. But now Bufang suddenly wanted to make the restaurant's dishes rare through the challenge. After all, the rarer something was, the greater its value. The restaurant's delicacies will help you consolidate your cultivation base, make breakthroughs, and produce chaotic energy. Bufang clasped his hands behind his back, the corners of his mouth curling upward into an unfathomable smile. Then, he turned and stepped into the kitchen. Xiao Ai. See our guests out and close the door. If you want to taste the restaurant's delicacies, please prepare for the challenge tomorrow. In the restaurant, Xiao Ai paused for a moment, then she quickly replied. After all, he was the boss, so she had to cooperate with him. Viscount Ash suppressed the excitement in her heart and gave the restaurant a deep look, as if she was trying to memorize the whole restaurant. Then, she walked out of the restaurant with Xiao Ai in the lead. Creak, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the door of the restaurant was closed. Master Zhen Yong looked at the closed door, his heart bleeding. He was so close. So close. Why couldn't he have persevered? If he had persevered, he might have been able to obtain that wisp of chaotic energy. Anger, resentment, regret, all kinds of emotions welled up in his heart. Don't be angry, Master. There will be more challenges tomorrow. As long as you complete them, you will have the opportunity to enter the restaurant to taste the food and obtain chaotic energy. I've waited for tens of thousands of years. Do you still need one more day? Viscount Ash said faintly as she walked past Master Zhen Yong, who was holding his head in his hands and regretting his decision. Her words made Master Zhen Yong's body tremble. That's right. There will be more challenges tomorrow. I'll come again tomorrow. The group of people left. However, the news that a dish had helped a saint of the Great Path produce chaotic energy had spread throughout Void City. TSK. Viscount Ash's cultivation base is one of the top saints of the Great Path. Maybe it's just a coincidence. What a joke. A chef's food is a betrayal of the Queen's faith. This kind of person should be strangled to death. Don't be fooled by that chef. Maybe Viscount Ash is in cahoots with that chef. The so-called challenge is just a lie. Many people were muttering the same thing. Of course, many people were not fools. They had all seen the terrifying challenge with their own eyes. Many challengers cried because of the spicy taste, and they could not stop their tears. Some of the audience even wanted to taste it, but just one mouthful was enough to make them wish they were dead. It did not make sense that Viscount Ash was the chef's accomplice. Of course, the news was shocking to most people. However, it was nothing to the real bigwigs. When Cursed Goddess Soul heard the news, she just smiled disdainfully. She did not care. She would continue her cultivation and plot for the big event. The news spread. The whole Void City was shrouded in an uproar. On the third day, almost half of the people in District A had gathered in the area where the restaurant was located, bringing the traffic there to a near standstill. If it were not for the Duke's men, the area might have expanded further. So, there was no other way. The Duke could only send someone to set up a projection array again to broadcast the challenge to the whole district. Perhaps it was because of Viscount Ash's successful breakthrough yesterday. That incident seemed to be a fuse. Many people were so excited that they could not control themselves. They were waiting and looking forward to it. Many people even fantasized about tasting the delicious food. The delicacies that were originally hated by everyone were no longer rejected by so many people. As long as it could improve one's cultivation base, it was a good thing. It was nothing to betray the Queen's faith. Creak. It was out. Everyone's spirits were lifted. Many people widened their eyes and looked into the distance. They did not know what kind of challenge Bufang would give today and what kind of dark cuisine he would cook. However, this did not stop them from looking forward to the success of the challenge. In fact, it also aroused the competitive spirit in people's hearts. Creak. Bufang walked out of the restaurant. He glanced at the crowd outside and yawned. These people are really early. The number of challengers today will be increased to 100. Bufang glanced at the crowd, rubbed his head, and said faintly, "If the challenge is successful, you will get a chance to taste my delicious food." Well, you all know the effect of delicious food, right? It's instant, quick, and pleasurable. Bufang said. Many people were so excited that their breathing quickened. Master Zhenyang's eyes widened, and his nostrils kept spewing hot air. He had come to challenge again. He would not give up. Viscount Daoluan didn't come today. He had failed twice in his challenges and made a fool of himself twice. The pride in his heart had long since been uprooted, like a stalk of onion. In order to save some face for himself, he did not come today. Owner Bu, what is today's challenge? Viscount Ash asked as she looked at Bufang with a gentle look in her eyes. As the only person who had passed the challenge, she was qualified to buy food in the restaurant and taste it. Yesterday's bowl of dragon whisker noodles and the feeling of floating in the air lingered in her heart like a nightmare. She could not forget it at all. That was why she came again today. It was not just to be curious about the challenge. She also came to taste the delicious food. She had become a captive of Bufang's food. Bufang glanced at Viscount Ash. Bufang's attitude toward the first customer of Master Chef Little Store was very gentle. Today's challenge, the third shot of dark cuisine. Death Spicy Strip. Death Spicy Strip? The moment this name appeared, many people were stunned. Spicy Strip? What was that? Many people were dumbfounded. Looking at the dumbfounded crowd, Bufang breathed a sigh of relief. If only Hades' era was here. He would definitely jump for joy. Of course, this spicy strip was different from the previous ones. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. The moment Bufang's voice rang out, exclamations rang out one after another. Huh! Bufang was taken aback. The crowd parted. Several people walked out from behind the crowd. As soon as these people appeared, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and exclaimed in surprise, Countess Adong, Countess Luming, and Marchioness Ruoshue. Hiss! They're all big shots. Bufang froze and his eyes narrowed. These people were all wearing brocade robes, and their auras were extremely strong and fluctuating. The leader was a beautiful woman, and beside her was Countess Adong, who had fought with Bufang before. Countess Aitong's face did not look too good. Beside Countess Adong was a short-haired woman with a huge axe on her back. She was Countess Luming, one of the three great earls. In addition to these three big shots, there was also a little girl. The little girl clasped her hands behind her back, looking old and experienced. The appearance of this group of people made everyone hold their breath. What were they going to do? Many people were dumbfounded. Were these earls and marchioness here to destroy the restaurant? Because the restaurant had betrayed the queen's faith? However, what happened next? Countess Aitong's words made everyone more and more stunned. Stinky Chef, we'll also try your dark cuisine challenge. What? The earls and marchioness also wanted to challenge? Did they also value this chef's dishes? Bufang narrowed his eyes. In fact, he didn't expect this either. However, he didn't care. Okay. Anyway, there are 100 challengers. However, in view of your participation, the difficulty of this challenge will be slightly increased. Chapter 1753. Two earls, a marquis, and an inexplicable little girl. The appearance of this group shocked many people. Of course, most of them were curious. Were earls and marquises interested in this restaurant as well? Of course, they were not surprised. Earls and marquises also needed to cultivate, and they would buy pills from the alchemy workshop every day to improve their cultivation base. Even after years of cultivation, they could not produce a wisp of chaotic energy. Now, however, they learned that chaotic energy could be obtained through food. The shock was no less than the discovery of a new continent. Bufang glanced at the four people. Then, he glanced at the little girl. This little girl is interesting. I can't believe she can remain calm in front of the three great figures of Void City. Since you also want to challenge, come and sit at the table. There are a total of 100 slots, Bufang said. Only by completing the challenge will you have a permanent chance to taste the restaurant's delicacies. Bufang rubbed his head and yawned. Countess Adong snorted inwardly. She clearly remembered that Bufang had stolen her phoenix egg. Although it was a dead egg, it had humiliated her. The little girl was calm and composed, with a calmness that did not belong to her age. Of course, perhaps this little lowly only looked young on the outside, but in reality, her age was already at the level of an old monster. With the addition of the earls and marquises, many people began to tremble. Many people began to tremble. They sat down at the table, feeling much more nervous than before. Perhaps they were also excited. To be able to compete with the great figures at the same table was also a kind of excitement. Today's dark cuisine is death spicy strip, Bufang said. He walked to the table, where the white tiger heaven stove was already placed. Master Jin Yong clenched his fists and cheered himself on. He must succeed in this challenge. Even if there were earls and marquises, he would not admit defeat so easily. Well, the challenge is very simple. You just need to finish the spicy strips in front of you. Bufang stroked his chin. Owner Bu, the dark cuisine this time is the same as yesterday. Is it all spicy? One of the challengers said with a serious expression. Bufang nodded. After that, he didn't say anything more. Although they were all spicy. However, the death spicy strip was fundamentally different from the 18 hell curry rice from yesterday. One type of spiciness was on the surface, while the other type of spiciness affected the soul. Good luck. Bufang shrugged. The production of spicy strips was not complicated. It was not much different from an ordinary spicy strip. Bufang had made a total of 101 sticks, and the extra one was for Marquis Langu. The latter was looking at them eagerly. However, Bufang felt that Marquis Langu might be having a good time today. Rumble rumble, inside the wok, 100 chili strips began to boil. Pitch-black smoke filled the air, and a strong smell wafted out. That aroma was incomparably ecstatic. It was a kind of spicy aroma that caused one's soul to throb just by smelling it. Many people's expressions changed. They felt extremely grim. As those who had watched the 18 hell curry rice yesterday, they knew very well how terrifying it was. Tap, 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 the sound of footsteps was hurried. Someone was knocking on the huge bronze door of the palace. A creak rang out. The bronze door opened a little. Pai Dong and Pai Shi looked at each other for a moment before entering the room. In the center of the palace, a scarlet robe was spread all over the ground as if it was flowing blood. Your Excellency Soul, Pai Dong and Pai Shi took a deep breath and said after entering the palace. What's wrong? Cursed Goddess Soul's eyes were closed. Her aura was fluctuating, and a black energy ball was spinning in front of her chest as if it was swallowing and spitting out terrible energy and power. Pai Dong and Pai Shi exchanged a glance and said, Your Excellency Soul, that restaurant has attracted the attention of the whole Void City. Countess Adong, Duchess Ruoshui, and many others have stepped into that restaurant to participate in some dark cuisine challenge. We are worried that they will give up on us and choose Her Excellency Nethery. Pai Dong and Pai Shi said. As Soul's cavalry of death, it was not wrong for them to worry about this. Cursed Goddess Soul slowly opened her eyes. His gaze fell on Pai Dong and Pai Shi. That emotionless gaze caused the two of them to tremble. The two of them, who could fight the Earl together, actually felt an inexplicable chill. It's fine. It's just a restaurant. It won't amount to much, Soul said lightly. She really didn't put a restaurant in her eyes. Just like the Soul Demon universe, Void City's hatred and prejudice toward chefs was not low. These people would never give up on him, who had a promising future, and choose the weak cursed goddess Nethery. Unless those people were stupid. But the food in that restaurant can help strengthen the curse energy. We're worried that our allies will be bribed. If that happens, our advantage in Void City will be gone, Bufang said, shaking his head. Pai Dong and Pai Shi said. Haha. Food is a taboo in Void City. It's the queen of curses' abhorrence. Soul stood up from the ground, her blood-red robe billowing in the wind. But Her Majesty hasn't said anything yet. Pai Dong and Pai Shi exchanged a glance and said in unison. This was what worried them the most. Under normal circumstances, the Queen of Curses should have made a statement as soon as the restaurant opened in District A, right? But this time, it was very unusual. The Queen of Curses was still indifferent after the restaurant caused such a big stir in Void City. That gave Soul pause. She clasped her hands behind her, and her enchanting face furrowed. This seemed to be a problem worth thinking about. The so-called alliance was actually very fragile. If the benefits were enough, it was not a big deal for the so-called alliance to betray them easily. Moreover, this was Void City. The people of Void City were not easy to deal with. How about, Your Excellency Soul, you go to the Queen of Curses and see what she thinks? Pai Dong and Pai, she said. That way we can make preparations as soon as possible. If worse comes to worst, we'll destroy this restaurant immediately. Soul pondered for a long time. There's no hurry. I have a feeling that I'm about to break through. When I do, I'll go to the Queen. Once I break through, our plan will begin. Soul's eyes grew deeper. Pai Dong and Pai Shi's faces lit up. Your Excellency Soul is the chosen one. You will certainly sit on the throne of Void City. We look forward to that day. Soul's face was expressionless. Well, you may leave now. You are my meritorious subjects, so I won't mistreat you. Pai Dong and Pai Shi quickly left the palace. In the depths of the palace, flower petals were blooming. No one knew when Duchess Tianlian had appeared in a corner of the palace. Aunt Lian, what do you think? Soul asked, looking at Duchess Tianlian. Pai Dong and Pai Shi's worries are very accurate. In fact, I have the same concern. The Queen's attitude is too abnormal. Duchess Tianlian sighed. Soul nodded. She did not expect that even Aunt Lian was so afraid of that restaurant. In that case, there are some things that must be done quickly. Looking at Soul's grave expression, Duchess Tianlian seemed to have guessed what she was thinking. Soul. Working with the Soul Demon is tantamount to asking a tiger for its skin. You are the cursed goddess of Void City. You must not let Void City fall into eternal damnation. Duchess Tianlian said in a deep voice. Soul's eyes narrowed and she nodded slowly. Aunt Lian, I'm going to start my breakthrough. Protect me. All right. In Cooking God Little Store, outside the restaurant, a long table was set up. On both sides of the table, 100 seats were lined up neatly and orderly. Countess Adong and the others sat in the first few seats. Their faces were somewhat grave. Just the spicy smell in the air was enough to make their souls palpitate slightly. He couldn't believe it. How terrifying was this substantial dish? The dark cuisine was indeed worthy of its reputation. There was a huge difference between what they saw in the projection array and what they saw in reality. Gulp, gulp, many people swallowed their saliva. Some even had beads of sweat rolling down their foreheads. Viscount Ash also stared at the screen. Suddenly Viscount Ash saw you. Your Excellency Nethery, Viscount Ash asked a good question. You nodded and pursed her lips into a faint smile. In fact, Viscount Ash was also appropriately curious about this legendary cursed goddess. She did not seem to have the arrogance and aura of a cursed goddess. Viscount Ash quite admired her approachability. Although she had not chosen a side yet, she was not in a hurry. Swish Bu Fong picked up a spicy strip with his chopstick. He took it out of the wok. Swish, the surface of the spicy strip was dripping with oil, which was dark red in color. It was quite a shocking sight. Bu Fong could not help but raise his eyebrows, secretly clicking his tongue. Death Spicy Strip. As the name suggested, this was a spicy strip prepared by death, the kind that could really kill people. The chili sauce prepared to make the Death Spicy Strip was the nightmare version of the abyssal chili sauce, which was even more terrifying than the combination of chili peppers yesterday. It was made from the most terrible nightmare chili peppers in the chaotic universe, pickled and fermented. Through the law of time that Bu Fong had mastered, he controlled the speed of the chili's fermentation and put the jar of pickled chili sauce into the depths of the planet's core to feel the infiltration of the star power. It made the spicy taste deeper and more condensed. Even Bu Fong did not dare to try it. This kind of spiciness might really be fatal. He took a deep breath. His nasal cavity was aching from the spicy taste. Bu Fong's eyes suddenly focused. His hand moved. Swish. The spicy strips flew out, one by one. Bufang picked them up from the wok with his chopstick. The length of the spicy strips was not short. Each one was half a meter long. It was placed in a porcelain bowl in front of each challenger. This is the dark cuisine for today's challenge, the death spicy strip. Well, today's challenge will definitely have a winner. The winner will be decided by the length of spicy strips you eat. Half a meter of spicy strips. The shorter the length, the easier it is for you to win. Hiss, hiss, hiss. As soon as Bufang's words fell, everyone's expression changed. Was Bufang looking down on them? He did not intend to let them finish the spicy strips? Did he think that they could not finish the spicy strips? There was nothing strange about it. Although the spicy smell in the air was much stronger, however, this kind of density made them feel much better. The more superficial something was, the less terrifying it was. Yesterday's 18 hell curry did not smell spicy at all. In fact, it was a little fragrant. But now? As soon as it entered their mouths, they could not stop their tears from flowing. Pretentious prankster, Countess Adong snorted disdainfully. Marchioness Ruoshui smiled faintly. The little girl sat in a chair, swinging her fair legs. She did not care about the so-called spicy strips at all. Sweat trickled down Master Jin Yong's forehead as he clenched his fists. Bufang glanced at the crowd. With a thought in his mind, Buzz life force gathered. A life sphere condensed above everyone's head. The sphere was spinning and life force was flowing. It was as if it would heal them at any time. Many people sucked in a cold breath at the sight of it. Was it that exaggerated? Death spicy strips, could it really kill people? Chapter 1754. The function of the life ball was self-evident. There was no doubt that it was used to vent one's internal heat and save one's life in an emergency. Many people did not think much of it. After all, the strength of the people present was not weak. There were even marquises and counts among them. These were chaotic saints, existences who stood at the peak of the universe. Even the weakest among them was a peak god-emperor. Existences at this level had a strong life force. Watering the life ball with their blood could even bring a dead star back to life. Therefore, they did not think they would be killed by a spicy strip. Countess Adong sneered. She did not have a good impression of Bufang. That egg thief. Marchioness Ruoshui was one of the three marquises. Bufang knew Marquis Langgu and Marchioness Modi. Marchioness Ruoshui was slightly weaker than the other two, but she was at least a Marquis-level expert. The spicy strips had been distributed. Bufang pulled out a chair, sat down, leaned against it, and looked indifferently at the audience. You see the spicy strips in front of you? I won't describe the rules, so be prepared. Now the challenge begins. Bufang said. There was no passionate expression. It was just a simple sentence. After that, Bufang took out a cup of hot tea and gently blew at the smoke. The moment Bufang's voice rang out, the people around him perked up. Viscount Ash was next to you, and so was Xiao Ai, watching the challenge together with you. The moment Bufang gave the order on the other side of District A. In a bronze palace, the doors of the palace were slammed shut with a bang. Duchess Tianlian sat quietly in front of the palace, as tranquil as a blooming lotus. Boom! Behind the doors, a terrible aura swept out. Nethery, the cursed goddess, had begun her breakthrough. The death spicy strips were black and red. Each one was half a meter long. As soon as Bufang's voice rang out, these people grabbed the spicy strip. Everyone looked at each other and saw the solemn look in each other's eyes. Then, he stuffed the spicy strip into his mouth with great difficulty. For the chaos energy. This strange challenge. I'll just endure it. If they could pass the challenge, it would be like ascending to the heavens in a single step. Countess Adong narrowed her eyes. She stretched out her hand and pinched the front of the spicy strip with her thumb and middle finger. Then, she moved her nose closer to the spicy strip. A wave of spiciness surged out. She felt a burning sensation in her nasal cavity, as if it was about to be burned to pieces. It seemed a little scary. Bufang drank his tea leisurely. He looked like an old man in his 70s or 80s. Of course, no one paid attention to him. The projection matrix descended and locked onto the group of people who were challenging. It focused on Countess Aidong, Marchioness Ruoshui, and the others. After all, these big shots had also come to participate in the challenge, so it was naturally the highlight of the show. Master Zhenyong had always been the center of attention, but this time, he was reduced to a supporting role. It couldn't be helped. In front of the Count and the Marquis, he thought that an alchemy grandmaster had no status at all. The little girl swung her fair legs, grabbed the spicy strip, and narrowed her eyes. "I'll start first," Countess Aidong said. As soon as she said that, she stuffed the death spicy strip into her mouth. Although she did not know what a spicy strip was, she was fearless. That was because she had absolute confidence in her strength. She bit down. The chili sauce stained her lips. Rumble. Countess Aitong's eyes suddenly widened. For a moment, she thought she had eaten lava instead of food. The burning sensation made her tongue swell in an instant. Thud. She bit her teeth. Countess Aitong's nostrils fumed with hot air. As soon as the chili sauce entered her mouth, she felt as if it was burning her throat. What is this? It's so uncomfortable. This was the first time Countess Aidong had suffered such an impact. At this moment, Countess Aidong was no longer conscious. Around her, 100 challengers. The moment they bit down on the spicy strip, they all cried out in alarm and trembled. The life orbs above many people's heads exploded. With a poochie sound, water splashed down, sprinkling over their heads and drenching their bodies. Sizzle, hot air spread from these people's red skin. They did not even swallow the spicy strip, and their bodies were already unbearably hot. The breaking of the life orbs meant that they were eliminated. At that moment, the scene of dozens of life orbs exploding stunned everyone. Many people took a deep breath, feeling incredulous. The scene was too gorgeous. Bufang gulped down a mouthful of tea. He was not surprised at all. He did not fit in with the scene of the others exclaiming. Xiao Ai was already stunned. It was amazing. Viscount Ash narrowed her eyes and sucked in a breath of cold air. It seemed that the challenge this time was more terrifying than yesterday's. She was somewhat glad that she did not participate in the challenge today. Otherwise, she would be the one suffering. In an instant, 70 to 80 people were eliminated. The remaining dozen people were still trying hard. Countess Aidong, Marchioness Ruoshui, and the others were suffering, but it was still within the acceptable range. However, looking at the half-meter-long spicy strip, all that was left in their hearts was despair. Master Zhenyong was eating hard. Perhaps he was already familiar with this situation, so he kept eating hard. After all, there was only one winner in today's challenge. He had to be the only winner. He refused to admit defeat. Eat, eat, bite, bite. Bit by bit, he bit into the spicy strip. His whole face was red from the spiciness, and he looked like a fireball. But he still did not give up. Rumble. As they bit down behind them, a dark silhouette seemed to appear. It was the Grim Reaper. It was like the Grim Reaper who would take their souls away at any time. This dish could really kill a person. Countess Aidong burst into tears. She was a countess. How could she lose so easily in such a challenge? Many people exclaimed. Even a countess was crying because of the spiciness. Is this chef's challenge really so terrifying? The spicy strip challenge was like a storm. Everyone's competition was like a race on a racetrack. After a while, many people were eliminated again. Another life orb exploded, several more people were eliminated. There were only a few people left at the table. In fact, one countess could not stand it anymore and gave up. At the table, only Countess Aidong, Marchioness Ruoshui, the little girl, and Master Zhenyong were left. Countess Aidong refused because she did not want to admit defeat. Marchioness Ruoxue refused because of her strength. As for the little girl, she did not understand. Even Bu Fang was surprised by the little loli. Although she was grinning and shrugging her shoulders because of the spiciness, she was in a much better state than the Countess and the Marchioness. This kind of situation was really too magical. Bu Fang gave the little girl another look. She smiled at Bu Fang. She was doing this with ease. She did not look like she was in a challenge at all. The length of the spicy strip kept shortening. Except for the little girl, the other spicy strips were about the same length. Even if there was a difference, it was only a few centimeters. Especially under the observation of the projection array. This kind of emotion was magnified to the extreme. Many people clenched their fists. The spicy strip wriggled and became shorter inch by inch. Master Jin Yong had not given up yet. His lips were swollen like giant sausages. His eyes were red and swollen from crying. But he did not give up. In the previous 2 challenges, he had failed at the last step because he had given up and relaxed, but this time, he must complete the challenge. Bam! Countess Adong could not stand it anymore. She pushed her chair away and took several steps back. She clutched her chest. Swoosh! The life sphere exploded, and the ice-cold spring water of life poured over her body, making her feel refreshed. It was as if she had stepped into an icehouse after being exposed to the scorching sun for a long time at 40 degrees Celsius. The feeling of being reborn made her gasp for breath. Marchioness Ruoxue also gave up. She was graceful, but she kept wiping away her tears. Although she still had the ability to continue, she did not think it was necessary. If she continued, she did not know if she would fail. Everyone had a limit. The death spicy strip seemed to test the limits of one's life. As a marchioness, she would not easily challenge the limits of her life. Swoosh! Like Countess Adong, she was showered by the cold spring of life. She took a deep breath, and her eyes were filled with a sense of oblivion. The happiest thing in life was to feel the coolness of the water under the scorching heat. The Marchioness and the Countess had given up. This caused many people to exclaim endlessly in shock. Only Master Jin Yong and the little girl were left at the table, still eating the spicy strip numbly. Of course, the little girl's condition was much better than Master Jin Yong's. No one knew who this little loli was. But she could hold on for so long. The little girl glanced at Master Jin Yong. Then, the corners of her mouth lifted slightly. She suddenly sped up. A slurping sound rang out. She sucked hard, and the whole spicy strip went into her mouth, down her throat, and into her stomach. The sight of it made one's hair stand on end. The spiciness of the death spicy strip was enough to kill anyone who choked on it. But the little girl sucked it all the way to the end. Bu Fang was stunned. Master Jin Yong had long lost consciousness, and all he could do was eat the spicy strip. Finally, after the little girl finished the spicy strip, Bu Fang announced the end of the challenge. There was no doubt about it. The challenge was over. Poor Master Jin Yong. He had lost again. Master Jin Yong clenched his fists, unwilling to give up. Splash! The spring of life crashed down, drenching him completely. However, he was already numb to it. There were tears in his eyes. That was his heartache. The little girl shrugged. Countess Adong and Marchioness Ruoxue wiped their lips in the distance. Well, today's challenge is over. Given the special circumstances, we'll consider the 2 winners of the challenge this time. Bu Fang sighed and glanced at Master Jin Yong. In fact, if nothing unexpected happened, the winner of the challenge should be Master Jin Yong. Unfortunately, he had met this magical little girl. Even Bu Fang was unable to see through the little loli's background. Master Jin Yong was really miserable. Someone who could finish a death spicy strip in one gulp could only be described as miserable. Perhaps he could not bear to do so. Master Jin Yong was in a trance, desperate and suicidal. In the end, Bu Fang decided to consider him as the winner of the challenge. The little girl was just an accident. Excluding the little girl, Master Zhen Yong was the winner. Bufang's words stunned everyone. In the direction of the alchemy workshop, there was a long silence. Then, there was an exclamation and uproar. Master Zhen Yong! Master Zhen Yong! You succeeded in the challenge. You did it! You did it! We, the alchemists, are proud of you! Master Zhen Yong himself was in a trance. He even despaired. He had challenged 3 times, and each time, he had almost won. This was a huge psychological blow to a person. However, Bufang had allowed him to succeed. This kind of belated joy impacted his heart. Come with me. Let's go into the restaurant. Bufang gave the little girl a deep look, then glanced at Master Zhen Yong, who was in a trance. They stepped into the restaurant one after another. The others could only wait outside. Countess Aidong and Marchioness Ruoshui were among them. It was useless even if they were unwilling. They had failed the challenge. Similarly, Bufang prepared the Starry Sky dragon whisker noodles for them. A bowl of dragon whisker noodles and a mouthful of chaotic energy. Master Zhen Yong ate the dragon whisker noodles with trembling hands. With a slurp, he swallowed the noodles. His whole body seemed to be surrounded by softness. On the other side, the little girl had finished eating. With a thud, she put down the porcelain bowl and touched her mouth. I want another bowl. The little girl stared at Bufang with bright eyes. Compared with the death spicy strip, the dragon whisker noodles were more delicious. Bufang glanced at the little loli and ignored her. This infuriated the little loli. After Master Zhen Yong ate the dragon whisker noodles, his aura began to surge. Rumble! His aura fluctuated, and the whole void city seemed to be shaking at this moment. Meanwhile, at the same time on the other side of District A, above the palace of the cursed goddess, a strange phenomenon appeared. Chapter 1755. A strange phenomenon appeared. In front of the restaurant, everyone was startled. Many people turned to look into the distance, where the cursed goddess palace was located. No one had expected the cursed goddess palace to unleash such an aura. Countess Aidong sucked in a breath of cold air. Her lips had yet to recover from the spiciness, and she narrowed her eyes. Could it be that Lady Soul is about to break through the barrier? Marquis Ruoshui nodded. Once Her Excellency Soul succeeds, I'm afraid Void City is going to change. As a marquis, he naturally knew some secret. Cursed Goddess Soul was too powerful, and the other 2 cursed goddesses were no match for her. With a good card in her hand, it would be difficult for Soul to lose. Boom! Black clouds rolled over, and primal chaos energy filled the air. All of a sudden, the breakthrough in the restaurant was nothing. Master Zhen Yong was also miserable. It seemed that he could never be the center of attention. He had been suppressed in all kinds of challenges, and now, even his breakthrough had clashed with Cursed Goddess Soul. Many people felt sorry for Master Zhen Yong. Of course, Master Zhen Yong did not care about that at the moment. He was immersed in the sea of chaotic energy, unable to extricate himself. A wisp of primal chaos chi appeared, causing his cultivation base to rise steadily. He was already a peak saint of the Great Path, only half a step away from becoming a chaotic saint. Now, under the stimulation of the death spicy strip and the dragon whisker noodle, his body became more and more lively. Master Zhen Yong's cultivation base suddenly broke through like a geyser. He instantly broke through his shackles. He had become a chaotic saint. Boom, boom, boom. Ripples of energy kept spreading from Master Zhen Yong's body and filling the world. In the distance, the little girl watched calmly as Master Zhen Yong broke through. Bufang, on the other hand, was holding a teacup and drinking tea. He was also very calm. Viscount Ash wore a smile on her face, feeling happy for Master Zhen Yong. She could see his persistence, and now that he had achieved a breakthrough, it was indeed something worthy of congratulation. This breakthrough lasted for a long time. Holding the teacup, Bufang walked to the front of the restaurant and looked into the distance. Over there black clouds shrouded the area, and the power of the curse seemed to have transformed into 9 black dragons that coiled between heaven and earth. Cursed goddess Soul has also begun to break through? You walked to Bufang's side. There was no joy or sorrow in her pitch-black eyes. The cursed goddess palace. Hotu, who was wearing a graceful and luxurious robe, stood at the door with her hands clasped behind her back. She looked at the 9 roaring black dragons with an indifferent expression. Duchess Nightmare walked over, her hair swirling around her like a wisp of smoke. "Looks like we should also prepare ourselves," Duchess Nightmare said. Hotu nodded calmly. The competition between the primitive universe and the soul demon universe had already entered a white-hot stage. And this Void City was perhaps the most important thing to break this white-hot atmosphere. Naturally, she would not give up the throne of Void City. Outside Void City, there was a distortion. A crack appeared. One by one, figures walked out of the crack. The auras of these figures were incomparably powerful, as if they could destroy everything at any time. The one in the lead was an expert wrapped in a black robe. His eyes were bloodshot. He raised a hand which was holding an hourglass. The golden sand in it was slowly pouring out. The hourglass of space and time is ready, all that's left is for Soul to sit on the throne. His voice rang out, shaking the void. Rumble. Blasts of air swept out in all directions. Many of the white bone ships were destroyed by the shockwaves. The black-robed man raised his hand and gently waved it forward. The next moment, the figures behind him frantically leapt out and dashed into the distance. Their roars echoed through the universe. Rumble! They leaped over the bone ships and landed at the bottom of Void City. The bottom was in the shape of a huge inverted cone, and when they landed on it, their bodies seemed to merge with it. Their black robes flapped noisily. The hourglass in the man's hand was flowing at a steady pace. In the restaurant, Bufang exhaled and chewed the tea leaves. The bitterness and sweetness of the tea burst out of his mouth at the same time. The little girl came to Bufang's side. "I want more," she said. Bufang patted the little loli's head and did not say anything. Master Jin Yong's breakthrough was nearing its end. Bufang's food was delicious and had no side effect. It was a must-have product for breaking through the barrier. For the first time, Master Jin Yong experienced the pleasure of emptying 1,000 miles in one go. Rumble! The chaotic energy was compressed in his hand. After a long time, he opened his eyes. The cursed goddess palace's breakthrough continued. There was no doubt that her foundation was much stronger than Master Jin Yong's. "How do you feel?" Bufang asked in a relaxed tone as he took out an oyster pancake and took a bite. Master Jin Yong's face was full of excitement. Intoxicated by the power, he licked his lips and savored the delicious taste of the dragon whisker noodles. It's hard to imagine that food can have such power. Why does the Queen of Curses want to stop food? This kind of product is much stronger than medicinal pills. Medicine is 30% poisonous, but delicacies can satisfy one's taste buds and still have the same effects as medicinal pills. Inconceivable! Unbelievable! Master Jin Yong used the word unbelievable to express the shock in his heart. Bufang, on the other hand, twitched the corner of his mouth. "It's time to leave now that you've had your fill. However, those who have passed the challenge will have the opportunity to taste and buy food from the restaurant. Would you like to give it a try?" Viscount Ash and Master Jin Yong's eyes lit up. Outside the door, some experts who had mastered the projection array also shifted the image to the restaurant. Compared to Soul's breakthrough, this matter was not worth paying attention to at all. The little girl's eyes lit up as well. Viscount Ash and Master Jin Yong immediately began to order dishes. Many people looked at each other. Wasn't this restaurant Nethery's backer? Soul was about to break through. Why was the restaurant so calm? Wasn't he worried that cursed goddess Soul would come after them after her breakthrough? Soul was so ruthless that she would not allow any possibility of threatening her to exist. In Soul's opinion, you were already a dead person. I didn't kill you before, but now, if I manage to break through, I will definitely not let you off. At this time, the best way to deal with you, who had no competitiveness at all, was to take you away. Although Lord Nethery was protected by Duchess Yunlan was not around. But Her Majesty's soul must have considered this. She definitely had a way to transfer Duchess Yunlan away, under everyone's astonished gaze. You also ordered a dish. Bufang nodded and went into the kitchen to start cooking. Not long after, the restaurant was filled with a fragrant aroma. Xiao Ai walked out with the delicacies and placed them in front of everyone. The little girl, Viscount Ash, Master Zhenyong, and the others ate happily. His mouth was full of grease. They were completely captivated by the delicacies. Under the illumination of the projection array, the scene of the three of them feasting crazily spread throughout Void City. Many people looked at the camera and gulped. On the other hand, there was a breakthrough in full swing. On the other hand, he was leisurely eating delicious food. His calmness made many people not know whether to laugh or cry. Nethery ate gracefully, and she even had the time to feed Foxy a mouthful. Suddenly, a loud rumble rang out. A dragon roar resounded through the whole Void City. The entire city began to shake. The 9 black dragons seemed to tear the starry sky apart, burrowed into heaven and earth, and disappeared in an instant. Boom! Chaotic energy, the power of curse, and the power of sin slowly fell, erupting with a vast amount of energy. In the cursed goddess palace, Soul hovered in midair. Her hair was spread out and she was naked. A black ball wrapped in the power of sin was hovering in front of her chest. The sinful energy continued to spread and surged into her body. It made her stronger and stronger. At the same time, her aura broke through from the level of a saint of the great path to the level of a chaotic saint. Finally, she broke through the shackles that had been holding her back for a long time. Buzz, the power of sin condensed into a thin shirt that wrapped around her body. She opened her eyes. It was as if she could see through the ages. Soul's aura grew more and more powerful and terrifying. I did it, holding the black ball. The corners of Soul's mouth curved upward into a happy smile. The ball turned and stared at her like a huge eyeball. She stared at the ball, which reflected her figure. Soon. It's really soon. She murmured. Rumble. The chaotic energy in her suddenly exploded. The bronze door suddenly exploded into pieces. Outside the door, Duchess Tianlian, who was guarding the door like a white lotus, slowly raised her hand. The broken bronze door froze in place and fell to the ground. Duchess Tianlian's hair fluttered in the wind, and her eyes flashed. After a long time, from the depths of the palace, a graceful figure wearing a thin black robe slowly walked out. You did it? Duchess Tianlian said with a smile. Although Soul had just broken through, the threat emanating from her made her, a duke who stood at the peak of the chaotic saint realm, feel a little creepy. I did it, Soul grinned. She turned her eyes. It was as if she could see through the palace at a glance. Aunt Lien. It's time for the plan to begin, Soul said. The smile on Duchess Tianlian's face gradually faded, and in the end it turned into a sigh. Buzz, in a flash, Soul's body turned into numerous afterimages as she rushed out of the palace in a flash. She seemed to have the aura of a sovereign descending upon the world. In Cooking God Little Restaurant. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, everyone was lounging in their chairs. It was rare for the noblewoman to have a taste of delicacies. She had no taboos about them. She knew why the queen hated delicacies. Suddenly, the noblewoman, who was leaning back in her chair, narrowed her eyes. She opened them with a serious look. What's wrong? You seemed to notice the change in the noblewoman's state and could not help but ask. Duchess Yunlan took a deep breath. You, take care of yourself. The queen has summoned me. I'm going to the queen's palace, she said. Outside, the black dragons had dispersed. Cursed goddess Soul had completed her breakthrough. And the moment she did, the queen summoned her. The playfulness in it, even if the queen's summoning was fake, she had to go. Duchess Yunlan rose to her feet and glanced at Bufang. Little chef, protect you. Duchess Yunlan gave Bufang a deep look. Then, he took a step forward and disappeared. Viscount Ash, Master Zhenyong, and the others also noticed that something was wrong. They all sucked in breath. Outside, the nobles, who had been paying attention to everything, began to disperse noisily. Outside the restaurant, a shadow flickered in an instant. The next moment, the black veil surged. A graceful figure hovered in midair, facing the restaurant. Bufang's heart skipped a beat. Nethery's eyes narrowed. They exchanged a glance and walked out of the restaurant. Outside the door, they looked up. They exchanged glances with cursed goddess Soul, who was hovering in midair. Chapter 1756. Swish. The atmosphere was very quiet. In front of the restaurant, with his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang looked at Soul, who was hovering in midair. Her aura was extremely powerful. There was no doubt that she had completed her breakthrough and had now reached the level of a chaotic saint. Moreover, unlike Master Zhenyong, Soul's foundation was too solid. Once she broke through, she would soar into the sky. She was an existence comparable to a duke. Even Bufang felt a little pressured by her. Bufang's current cultivation base was only at the level of a saint of the Great Path. He wondered if he should find an opportunity to break through to the chaotic saint realm. However, after the system upgrade, it would not be so easy for Bufang to break through to the chaotic saint realm. Bufang couldn't find any opportunity, so he could only wait patiently. In fact, Bufang should learn to be satisfied. After all, he had not been cultivating for a long time. Compared with those cultivators who had cultivated for tens of thousands of years, his cultivation time was too short. It was already incredible that he had reached his current level. After all, chaotic saints were the top experts of a universe, and it was not easy to reach them. You looked at Soul. Their eyes met, and there seemed to be a silent impact. "It's time to end this," Soul said. Her voice was cold. Her indifference made the hair of everyone present stand on end. The collision between the two cursed goddesses, was the competition for the throne finally going to be completely out in the open? Was Her Excellency Soul no longer hiding her purpose? Soul drifted down and landed in front of the restaurant. She walked step by step toward you. "Yunlan has been led away. She won't be able to save you this time," Soul said. "But I can give you a chance to live." Soul looked at Bufang and you. "You are really weak and not qualified to compete with me. I'll give you a chance. The Marquis of District B is missing a spot. Now, this spot is reserved for you. As long as you agree to become a Marquis, I'll spare your life," Soul said. The moment those words came out, everyone was dumbfounded. Countess Aitong's pupils constricted. Beside her, Marchioness Ruoshui's breathing stagnated in the distance. Marquis Langgu's eyes narrowed. His aura surged as if he was about to go berserk and turn into a peerless beast. So, this was why Soul had rejected Marquis Langgu's request? So that the position of Marquis would be vacated for you. Soul scanned the crowd indifferently. He didn't mind that the other two marquises of District B had gathered in this restaurant. You remained silent. Then, she shook her head. She also had her own persistence. Moreover, she did not think that Soul would let her go so easily. "You're not stupid. Soul must be going to war with Huda now, so you want to comfort her. After she dealt with Hudu, she might turn around and deal with her. Are you the Queen of Curses? Can you decide who the Marquis belongs to?" Suddenly, a chilly voice resounded. Viscount Ash frowned and said in an upright manner. She had a bad temper. She had wanted to stand on Soul's side, but now it seemed that she had to choose you. "Who do you think you are?" Soul's eyes suddenly turned black. The next moment, the power of sin and the power of curses turned into a black flood dragon and shot out in a flash. A hissing sound echoed through the air. Viscount Ash felt cold all over. It was as if she could not even use her chaotic energy. Bam! Just when the black flood dragon was about to reach Viscount Ash, Whitey's fan-like palm suddenly stretched out and grabbed the black flood dragon. The black flood dragon was roaring and biting continuously. It bit Xiao Bai's arm. With a thud, Xiao Bai crushed it. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered as he stared at Soul in the distance. Viscount Ash panted violently. She almost thought she was going to die. Cursed goddess Soul was really strong. Think about it carefully. There's not much time left for you, Soul said. The next moment, she drifted backward. In the next moment, her figure drifted backward. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared. Rumble in the distance. The cavalry of death closed in and surrounded the restaurant neatly. However, they did not approach the restaurant. They were only there to keep an eye on it. Bufang put his hands behind his back and focused his eyes. A marquis? This woman is really confident, Bufang said. You breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, she really did not care much about her identity as a cursed goddess. However, now that she had this identity, she could not help it. That's not confidence. That's pride. Her Excellency Soul has the right to be proud. Marchioness Rochue looked at Bufang and said, 90% of the civilians in Void City support Her Excellency Soul. 90% of the civilians in Void City support Her Excellency Soul. Of the 179 viscounts, 150 have chosen to support her. Of the 3 counts, except Countess Xiaoqiu, all support her. Of the 3 marquises, only 2 remain, and 1 supports her. She also has Duchess Tianlian's support and the entire Soul Demon Universe's backing. What reason does Her Excellency Soul have to lose? Marchioness Rochue gave Bufang a detailed analysis. Then, she sighed. They left the place with the 2 earls. Although Lord Soul's actions just now were rather chilling, it was still not enough. But, they still had to choose their side, and supporting Lord Soul was the best choice. Once they stood in the wrong position, they would face death. You have support as well. She has the entire Chaosverse behind her. Bufang pursed his lips. The Chaosverse? That declining universe? The little lowly who had been silent all this while chuckled, making Bufang slightly embarrassed. The power of the Soul Demon Universe is beyond your imagination, and this is because the master of the Soul Demon Universe, the Soul God, has yet to wake up, the little lowly said. Even the primitive universe might not be a match for the Soul Demon Universe. A single Chaosverse isn't a trump card at all. The little Lolita sat on the chair, swinging her white and tender legs and chuckling. Bufang pursed his lips. The Chaosverse is very strong. Bufang felt that he should call Hades' era and Lord Go over. With the help of the modern-day heaven gods, you should be very confident. In Bufang's opinion, Lord Go and Hades' era might have only been marquises before. But if their cultivation bases were restored to their peak, Heaven God life and Heaven God time were definitely not weaker than dukes. Yes, we have Lord Go. You narrowed her eyes and pursed her lips into a smile. Bufang's mind flickered. If it doesn't work, I'll call Lord Go and the others over to help. The 5 heaven gods of the Chaosverse were very strong. Heaven God Transmigration was missing. Moreover, Heaven God Space and Heaven God Destruction had not returned. But this was also a source of confidence. Your Excellency Nethery, if you don't mind, our alchemy workshop is willing to become your force. Master Zhenyong suddenly said. Viscount Ash's pupils constricted. Although the alchemy workshop was not strong, its strategic significance was extraordinary. Besides, Master Zhenyong was not the only grandmaster in the workshop. There was also Master Jiasong. Could Master Zhenyong make the decision? Jiasong? It's fine. That old fellow won't deny me. The corners of Master Zhenyong's mouth curled upward. He was quite confident. In this way, with the help of the alchemy workshop, Nethery was no longer a poor person. Although the strength of the alchemy workshop was not at the same level as that of Seoul, at least she had the strength to struggle. After all, Master Jin Yong was now a chaotic saint. Buzz, a voluptuous figure, walked through the void. Soon, a magnificent building appeared in front of her. The figure landed in front of the huge palace. In front of the gate that towered into the clouds stood a graceful figure. Duchess Tianlian sat cross-legged on the ground, surrounded by swirling petals. Yunlan, you're here. Duchess Tianlian looked at Duchess Yunlan and smiled. The noblewoman frowned. So it's you. Did you imitate the Queen's will and call me here? How dare you do such a presumptuous and crazy thing? Duchess Tianlian rose to her feet. In front of the huge palace, she was as small as an ant. However, her aura was not smaller than the building. It's not just you. Duchess Tianlian had a complicated look in her eyes. In the distance, a dreamlike figure suddenly appeared. Duchess Nightmare descended, and the three dukes gathered in front of the Queen's palace. Are you crazy? Duchess Nightmare said, looking at Duchess Tianlian. Soul's plan. She asked me to hold you back. Duchess Tianlian said with a chuckle. The petals flowed endlessly as if they were in the cycle of reincarnation. The fluttering petals were incomparably gentle. Imitating the Queen's will. You're really courting death. Duchess Nightmare's brows surged with killing intent. Although the Queen had not appeared for a long time, the dukes were still in awe of her. Yet, Duchess Tianlian dared to do such a treasonous thing. Alas! Duchess Tianlian sighed softly. Duchess Nightmare snorted coldly. She knew Duchess Tianlian's purpose, so after a cold snort, she turned and flew into the distance. However, the petals that had been lingering around Duchess Tianlian's body suddenly became sharp. All of a sudden, they turned into sharp blades. They were extremely sharp. Buzz, the majestic palace had disappeared. What was left? There were only endless petals. Stay and chat with me. We three sisters haven't had a good chat for tens of thousands of years. Duchess Tianlian said. Stay? You! Duchess Nightmare was indifferent, her killing intent surging. The noblewoman also shook her head in disappointment. The next moment, their auras suddenly erupted, and they instantly soared into the sky. Boom! The primordial chaos energy suddenly surged like a pillar. The three dukes were fighting fiercely. The cursed goddess palace. Hoodoo sat cross-legged in the center of the palace. Her eyes narrowed slightly. The ground began to tremble, and the tea in the bronze teacup in front of her rippled. Boom! The roar of savage beasts resounded. The trampling of armored horses. The space in front of Hoodoo suddenly widened. A dark scene swept out. Tens of thousands of cavalry of death were facing the goddess. A great battle, it was about to start. Chapter 1757. The palaces of the three cursed goddesses were actually located in three opposite corners of District A, forming a triangular shape. Outside the Huta's fairy palace, there was a large number of cavalry of death. They were cursed goddess Soul's subordinates and forces. Compared with Soul, the gap between Hoodoo and Soul was the gap between her troop. Compared with Soul, her forces were too weak. They could not withstand a single blow. Not to mention the cavalry of death, which was as sharp as a knife. Although the cavalry of death had suffered a loss in front of Bu Fang's restaurant last time, they were not weak at all. However, the cavalry at that time was not as strong as this one, be it in terms of number or high-end combat power. Rumbled dark clouds seemed to be gathering in the distance, and heaven and earth seemed to have changed color. That kind of terror, that kind of nightmarish aura, caused everyone's body to involuntarily tremble. Hoodoo slowly opened her eyes. She was sitting cross-legged in front of the palace, facing the dense cavalry of death in the distance. Her expression was very indifferent. That kind of indifference made many aristocratic experts who were secretly observing her feel extremely fearful. Why was Her Excellency Hutu so calm? Could it be that she wanted to fight against the entire cavalry of death by herself? That was impossible. not to mention that Her Excellency Sol was here. Suddenly, all the nobles froze. They found that Her Excellency Hudu was slowly walking forward, step by step, neither fast nor slow. Her robe fluttered as she faced the cavalry of death in the distance. The cavalry of death stopped. They were clad in black armor, surrounded by an aura of death, and the savage beasts below them roared as if to shatter the stars. Do you want to solve it yourself, or do you want me to help you? In midair, cursed goddess Sol's body was shrouded in a layer of curse power, which was accompanied by the power of sin, making her look very strange. As Sol spoke, everyone sucked in a cold breath. She was so domineering that she wanted a cursed goddess to commit suicide. He actually planned to make a cursed goddess commit suicide. She was too domineering. Her Excellency Sol was really domineering. Rumble. Huda did not answer. However, her eyes were full of mockery. Sol raised her hand, and the next moment, the cursed goddess palace seemed to shake. It seemed to be on the verge of shattering. The walls of the palace were covered with cracks. Do you think you still have a chance? Without Duchess Nightmare, you're no match for me, Sol said. The Lady of Earth's 3,000 strands of hair scattered down. Her red lips curved upwards slightly. She knew how crucial this battle was. After all, the battle between the primitive universe and the Soul Demon universe was in a white-hot stalemate. The battle in Void City would decide the outcome of the final battle between the two universes. Therefore, Hudu would not flinch. Moreover, she was such a proud person. How could she allow this woman in front of her to commit suicide just because she said so? He stomped his foot. Huda's body floated up, and his loose robe fluttered. Isn't it just an army? Come on, let me see how strong the famous cavalry of death, whose name has shaken the whole Void City, is. Huda said. His words fell. Up in the void, Sol's eyes narrowed. She raised her hand and waved lightly. Boom! The cavalry of death immediately began to trample. In the cooking god little store for a moment, the atmosphere was stagnant. Viscount Ash sat on a chair in the restaurant with a solemn expression. Since she had chosen you, she would have to worry about Nethery's future. Master Zhen Yong sighed as well. The two of them looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. In fact, they had to admit that you was at a great disadvantage, and she could not fight Sol at all. What should they do? If Lord Sol finishes dealing with Lord Hudu and is free, then Lord Nethery will be in trouble. Should Nethery go to support Hudu now? No. It was useless. With their strength, even if they went, they would only be a drop in the bucket. In the restaurant, Bu Fong, on the other hand, was leisurely sitting on a chair, drinking warm tea. The tea water rippled and rippled. Viscount Ash and Master Zhen Yong exchanged a glance. They did not know whether to laugh or cry. How can this chef be so calm? Doesn't he know that the current situation is very dangerous? You teased little Hu. She was very calm as Bu Fong. She knew that as long as she stayed in the restaurant, she would be the safest. In Yu's arms, little Hu's furry tail kept wagging. Countess Adong and the others had left. Only Marquis Langu was left in the restaurant. Although she and the others were very dissatisfied with Sol's actions, they had chosen Sol a long time ago, and their forces were inseparable from her. They were not like Marquis Langu, who could escape whenever he wanted. Their forces had long been integrated into Sol's. Therefore, they could only bite the bullet and continue. Marquis Langu sat in a corner, sulking. He was very sad about Marchioness Modi's death. Meanwhile, the magical little girl was strolling in the restaurant. Outside the restaurant, a group of cavalry of death was keeping watch. Their leader was a chaotic saint. Of course, he was the weakest chaotic saint, the same level as the guardian of the fighting pit. However, that was enough. They did not need to stop Bu Fong. They only needed to keep an eye on Bu Fong and the others and inform Sol if anything happened. Bu Fong finished his cup of tea. His body felt very warm. He placed the teacup on the table with a soft clink. Ding. Wait in the restaurant. I'll go back and call for help. Bufang thought for a moment and said, Call for help? Do you think this is a fight after school? Calling for help? A fight of this level did not depend on the number of people they had. What they needed was top-notch combat power. If their combat power was not enough, it would be useless no matter how many people they had. Do you really think there's no one else in the chaotic universe? Bufang glanced at Viscount Ash and twitched the corner of his mouth. You stood up and wanted to go with Bufang. However, Bufang waved his hand and refused. You stay here. You're absolutely safe in the restaurant. Unless the Queen of Curses makes a move, no one can break the restaurant's defense. Bufang said. The restaurant was built by the system, so its defense was absolutely strong. Viscount Ash and Master Jin Yong rolled their eyes. They thought that Bufang was exaggerating. It was just a shabby restaurant. Unless the Queen of Curses made a move, how strong could the defense of a mere restaurant be? The two of them felt that they were getting more and more unreliable. Sure enough, a chef could only cook obediently. You nodded and said nothing. Little Hu, Xiao Bai, and Xiaopi stay here. I'll be back soon, Bufang said. After that, with his hands clasped behind his back, he slowly walked toward the restaurant's second floor. A moment later, he disappeared around the corner of the stairs. He's gone. He's really gone? Viscount Ash and Master Jin Yong's faces turned a little unsightly. Did this chef run away at the last minute? Fortunately, he was not the strongest fighter in the restaurant. Marquis Lang Gu was considered the strongest fighter in the restaurant. Master Jin Yong also had the strength of a chaotic saint, and Viscount Ash's cultivation base was not weak either. They should be able to withstand Her Excellency Soul's attack. Master Jin Yong frowned. He sighed and walked out of the restaurant. He went back to the alchemy workshop to make some arrangements. Viscount Ash had her guards, but they were like a mantis trying to stop a chariot in the face of the cavalry of death. In fact, no one had expected this. Yu's forces had actually grown a lot without anyone noticing. At least, Xiao Ai could see it clearly. She clenched her fists. She knew that Nethery's forces were all brought by Owner Bu. The chef seemed to be constantly creating miracles. Perhaps there was still some suspense. In front of the Queen of Curses' palace, it was a chaotic domain. It was a domain created with chaotic energy that could easily kill a chaotic saint. Flower petals were drifting and swirling. There was a look of pity on Duchess Tianlian's cold face, like a delicate flower after a storm. The petals, wrapped in chaotic energy, kept bombarding the domain. Cracks were spreading. Duchess Nightmare's face was cold. She held a scythe in her hand, and every time she swung it, the petals were completely torn apart. Duchess Yunlan's body was plump. Clouds gathered around her and kept pushing the petals away. Because they had lost the upper hand, they were trapped in the domain. It had become very difficult for them to break the domain and break out of the blockade. Every time a duchess lost the upper hand, it would decide the outcome of the battle. In fact, Duchess Nightmare and Duchess Yunlan were already very anxious. They had been transferred away. The cursed goddesses they had chosen were probably in danger. If the cursed goddesses they had chosen were killed, they would be kicked out of the competition for the throne of Void City and lose the chance to go further. They had planned for tens of thousands of years for this. If they were kicked out of the competition, their plans would go up in smoke. For them, it was an unbearable price. So, they were trying their best to break out of the domain. As long as they could break out of the domain, no matter how strong Duchess Tianlian was, it would be very difficult to seal them again. Just because they could not beat her did not mean they could not escape. After all, they were all dukes, and the gap between them was very small. Boom! Boom! Explosions kept erupting in the domain of chaotic energy. The void was crumbling and being destroyed. Everyone was racing against time. Below Void City, on the inverted cone-shaped base of the city, shadows slowly emerged. One after another, black shadows slowly emerged. They continued to climb up and up and up, the power of sin spread and began to corrode the inverted cone-shaped base of the city. This subtle change did not seem to attract anyone's attention. Water poured down like a waterfall from the river of Cursed. A black shadow was actually moving against the flow of the cursed river that was filled with corrosive power. It was continuously climbing upwards. It was as if a clump of shadows had enveloped the entire Void City. Outside Void City, the huge figure shrouded in a black robe was indifferent. Even the void around him was frozen solid. In his hand was the hourglass of time and space. The golden sand in the hourglass was slowly flowing backward. His scarlet eyes were fixed on Void City, and there was a look of anticipation in them. The law of space trembled. Countless images flashed in front of Bu Fang's eyes. He unleashed his mighty mental force of the starry sky. Bu Fang seemed to have captured a trajectory, which was the orbit that connected the chaotic universe to Void City. It was Heaven God Space who had found the orbit before. However, following the death of the heavenly space god, this orbit disappeared. Now Bu Fang was going to rebuild it. Rumble! A beam of white light towered into the sky. Many people in Void City were taken aback. They turned around and looked. They found that a figure had rushed into the beam of light, twisted, and disappeared. The law of space kept spreading. Has he become a deserter? Cursed Goddess Soul twitched her mouth indifferently as she watched the beam of light disappear. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at the cavalry of death, which kept approaching Hutu. A black orb emerged, shrouded in the power of sin. The beam of light was very conspicuous. Many people thought that Bu Fang had become a deserter, and they were disappointed. Of course, some people were also disappointed. Now that the chef had escaped, the challenge was over, and they would no longer have the chance to obtain chaotic energy. However, the chef's escape did not have any effect on the situation in Void City. Buzz in the chaotic universe, in the center of the chaotic universe, in the temple of Heaven God Time, Lord Go, who was lying on the ground, opened his eyes. The next moment, his figure suddenly disappeared. In the temple of Heaven God Life, Hades Era, who was talking with a group of beautiful goddesses, focused his eyes and disappeared with a swish, leaving behind a group of stunned goddesses. Rumble! In a corner of the chaotic universe, Bu Fang emerged. Lord Go and Hades Era also appeared in a flash. The beam of light faded away. Bu Fang looked indifferently at Lord Go and Era, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. Lord Go narrowed his eyes. Bu Fang boy, you've come back just in time. The Temple of Heaven God Destruction has just emerged. Heaven God Destruction is returning. Chapter 1758. Wisps of the Law of Destruction lingered in the palace, making one's heart skip a beat. A tremendous aura and pressure fell from the sky. However, this walk made them uncertain. Bu Fang guessed that the Queen of Curses might be at the same level as the Soul God and the God of Cooking. A terrible fluctuation spread in an instant. Lord Go and Hades Era had no better idea. In fact, even they would not choose to detonate the Chaos Pot. The two of them looked at the Chaos Pot with lingering fear. The aura of the Chaos Pot was too terrifying. Even delicacies had been messed around with to such a terrifying degree. As expected of the chef, who was the most troublemaker in history. Bu Fang raised his hand and the menu fell quietly on his palm. The next moment, a plain bowl made of animal skin appeared in her hand. She breathed a sigh of relief. And there are two of them? She didn't want any variables to exist. The threat Hutu posed to her was much stronger than that of you. Lord Go said. Cursed Goddess Soul's eyes narrowed. She could finally go out and stir up trouble. Buzz, she flipped her delicate hand. The restaurant might not be able to withstand it. However, Hutu managed to block the Cavalry of Death's charge a few times. Her head wasn't caught in the door. If she went to that place of exile, she might not be able to come back. To Void City? Do you want to go? The look in everyone's eyes became very complicated. Sol jerked her head up. She was so happy to eat sweet and sour ribs with Bufang. In the center of the chaos pot, what's a beauty? Nothing. The next moment the two brothers rushed out. Lord Go and Hades' Era's eyes lit up. Once the Queen of Curses made a move, they were equivalent to the peak existences among chaotic saints. Hades' Era glanced at the goddess. The ground cracked open, and a golden menu flew out and hovered over Lord Go's paw. The Temple of Heaven God Destruction has emerged? They were an important force under Sol's command. How could Hutu, the cursed goddess, withstand it? The restaurants set up by the system might not be able to withstand the Queen of Curses' attack. He really did not think about this. He had only come back to ask Lord Go and Hades' Era to go to Void City to support you. Let's go, I can't wait any longer. His mental strength surged and white spots of light appeared rapidly. These white spots of light continued to spread and formed a passageway in the void. Every single Empyrean god represented the power of the entire Chaosverse. The three arrows seemed to have been shot from the depths of the universe, destroying heaven and earth. The three of them stepped inside. Huda's eyes narrowed. She flicked her delicate hand, and a silver arrow was knocked on it. Then, she pulled the bow and shot the arrow. The void exploded. He instructed some of the ancient heavenly gods under him to be more vigilant. Suddenly. Although this level was not bad, in front of the cavalry of death, it should be very weak. Was this a joke? The goddess's face froze, and she quickly waved her hand. Unless he was given enough time to create a teleportation array, he would not be able to teleport so many people at the same time. He laughed loudly, and a vast aura spread in an instant. Your Excellency, can't you take us with you? Hudu, on the other hand, had plucked a few strands of dog fur and hidden them in the depths of the Temple of Heaven God Time. Now, he was trembling under Hutu's bow. The Temple of Heaven God Destruction was located in a remote corner of the chaos space. As soon as the two of them attacked, Huda's expression became even more serious. A Duke-level expert? In midair, Bufang paused slightly. Hades' Era said. He had been worried about how to improve his strength, and the appearance of this recipe had opened a door for him. The moment the chaos pot appeared, Bufang kept casting gourmet arrays with his other hand. The arrays stacked on top of each other, gradually calming the restless aura of the chaos pot. The two of them focused their eyes. An army of 100,000. Why don't you go to heaven? Is this all Nethery's help? Nether King Ha rolled his eyes. Why would he ask Bufang such a retarded question? Did this guy only have eyes for beauties? It made their hairs stand on end. Pai Dong and Pai Shi were chaotic saints, and when they joined forces, they could even fight a marquis. Go to Void City? Huda's slender neck was covered with goosebumps. So, it was better to go back as soon as possible. The Chaos Core glowed brilliantly. Let's start preparing our trump cards. Hurry to Void City. The situation there is very urgent. Bufang was not very strong, but he had a lot of tricks up his sleeves. Bufang, young man, is Void City fun? Are there any beautiful women? Is there any delicious food? Bufang pondered for a while. The look in Bufang's eyes became deeper. It would be a lie to say that he was not curious about the famous land of exile. Pai Dong and Pai Shi landed and fired their bows. Bufang looked at Lord Go and Hades' Era. Her eyes narrowed. As they walked, they headed toward the Temple of Heaven God Temple. In the distant sky, her soul floated out and was torn to pieces by a tremendous force. Soul's pupils constricted, and her heart skipped a beat. Lord Go raised his paw and unleashed his mental force. Before long, Bufang said expressionlessly. A loud rumble rang out. Lord Go looked suspiciously at Bufang. Boom! A huge ferocious beast, as well as the cavalry riding on it, were directly crushed into minced meat by the huge force. The two brothers had used their lifeblood essence to nourish this bow for several epochs before forging this divine bow. With her strength, it was difficult for her to resist two chaotic saints. As soon as the bow appeared, heaven and earth trembled. He really did not know about the Temple of Heaven God destruction, Bufang said. Perhaps in his eyes, people were divided into men and women. Bufang glanced at Hades' era. Layers of gourmet arrays hovered in midair, holding up the chaos pot. The bowstring was pulled, and the roar of a divine dragon towered into the sky. The passage enveloped Bufang, Lord Go, and Hades' era. Pai Dong and Pai Shi exchanged a glance and saw the grave look in each other's eyes. The recipe turned into a beam of golden light and flew into Bufang's spirit sea. Suddenly, now that everything was ready, it was time to go to Void City. The temple of cursed goddesses below began to crumble. Hades' era smiled wryly. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. Let's go then. How dare you bully Nethery? Do you really think the chaotic universe has no dogs? The mysterious characters on the golden recipe flickered as if they were wriggling. The appearance of each recipe was equivalent to the return of a modern-day heaven god. The three of them walked slowly and soon they came to the depths of the palace. All right. As long as the chaotic universe is invaded, the chaos pot will judge and threaten the enemy. A goddess, who was as delicate as water, gave Hades' era a plaintive look. Her body slowly became blurry. Hotu was surrounded by a plume of origin energy. Ah, Void City, your Hades' era has arrived. Then, the bow in his hand exuded a domineering aura that made the bows tremble. I'll leave a trump card in the chaotic universe. Even a peak chaotic saint will be at a disadvantage if he comes. This young man has no idea what a beautiful woman is. After returning, Lord Go made some arrangements. They passed many cavalry and rushed toward Hutu. Many heaven gods in the chaos space looked up at the beam of white light that towered into the sky. Lord Go and Hades' era appeared at the same time. The three of them left the chaos core. Their terrible power made the souls of the nobles who were watching from afar tremble. Is that the primitive universe divine artifact, the bow of bliss? The surrounding goddesses all dispersed with a rumble. What if the soul demons invade now and the chaotic universe falls? Two people and one dog walked together. Of course, what really shocked Soul was not the returning beam of spatial light. Buzz, in the temple of heaven god life, the void flashed. A clone emerged and sat cross-legged in the depths of the temple of heaven god life. If your pot explodes, half of the chaos space will be gone, won't it? The chaos pot, glowing with golden light, emerged in an instant. But if that happens, the chaotic universe will be undefended. The cavalry of death could not get close to her at all. Rumble! Hades' era's eyes lit up. Bufang was hovering in midair. She was destined to die. Were Pai Dong and Pai Shi really going to kill the cursed goddess? Rumble! The beam of spatial light that had disappeared reappeared. Cursed goddess Soul looked on indifferently. A rumbling sound rang out and the sky shook. Bufang did not think the Queen of Curses would make a move. All I need to do is scare the enemy away. At Bufang's words, Lord Go breathed a sigh of relief. Huda's cultivation base was not weak. She was a peak saint of the Great Path, and was only a step away from stepping into the realm of chaotic saint. She had grown moldy after staying in the temple of heaven god life. Bufang glanced at Hades' era. The temple of heaven god destruction was also in ruins. The aura emanating from the beam of spatial light was terrifying. That's why you want us to go to Void City and help Nethery? Babies, everyone go back. This king is going out to have fun. At this moment, a wisp of Bufang's divine sense drifted out and turned into a little man, sitting cross-legged under the chaos pot, holding it with his eyes closed as he cultivated. Bufang nodded and carefully read the golden recipe. Bufang raised a hand. Here, another recipe. Let's go make some arrangements. You go and prepare the trump card to protect the chaotic universe. Do you want us to bring an army of 100,000 to help Nethery? Didn't you say she has no one behind her? Of course, Bufang did not explain anything. Hades' Era sighed softly. Hutu put his hands behind his back, his eyes gleaming with white light, and his aura was extremely powerful. He furrowed his brows, and his heart was racing. As soon as his voice rang out, Hades' Era and Lord Go disappeared. A group of goddesses was chatting with each other. The huge temple of heaven god life suddenly became cold and cheerless. Hades' Era appeared. The beam of light fell in the direction of the restaurant. Erha was very curious. Void City was a famous place in the universe, and he was very curious about it. Instead, rumble. Aren't you afraid that the spatial tunnel will explode? Bufang said. Then, with a whistling sound, it soared into the sky. In the Temple of Heaven God Time, the palace shook violently with a deafening rumble. With a thought, rumble. Soon, they arrived at the Temple of Heaven God Destruction. The three of them looked at each other. The next moment, rumble. In midair, how could she, a saint of the Great Path, resist it? The next moment, the Temple of Heaven God Time appeared. After doing all this, her eyes lit up, and she walked excitedly out of the temple with her cat-like steps. Pai Dong and Pai Shi steadied themselves. Lord Go said, frowning. Lord Go, on the other hand, was very excited. What's that? An arrow shot out, directly colliding with the 3 arrows shot by the Pai Dong and Pai Shi brothers. 3 arrows shot over from all directions, intending to pierce through the Huda clan. No. The Soul Demon universe and the primitive universe are at war. They don't have the time to come to the chaotic universe to cause trouble. He thought to himself. Chapter 1759. How could Soul be wrong about this aura? The aura of a Duke-level expert might be slightly weaker than that of the 3 Dukes, but it was not much weaker. That chef had left and returned, and he had brought 2 Duke-level experts with him. What the F***ck? Cursed goddess Soul almost cursed out loud at this moment. She never thought that you would have such a helper. Experts from the chaotic universe? But didn't they say that all the heaven gods of the chaotic universe were dead? That desolate universe, why did it bring 2 Duke-level powerhouses? Boom! An explosion rang out. Holding the bow of bliss, Huda blocked the attacks of the 2 brothers. Her face was indifferent, and she looked as graceful as a fairy. Her aura fluctuated, but she did not seem to mind at all. The bow of bliss was a divine artifact of the primitive universe. When she came to Void City, she had borrowed it from a chaotic saint. With it, her fighting prowess would rise to a whole new level. Cavalry of Death. All of you attack. Soul's eyes were cold, and a fierce aura exploded out of her. The next moment, countless silhouettes shot out. Bestial roars shook the sky. The cavalry of death galloped forward. The leader of the cavalry was a chaotic saint, and the ground trembled with every step he took. Cursed goddess Soul's eyes were surging with flames. She glanced in the direction of the restaurant. I was going to spare your life. Since that's the case, I'll make you suffer eternal damnation. Cursed goddess Soul's voice was cold. The next moment, she flipped her hand. A pitch-black spear appeared in her hand, and the tip of the spear was filled with the power of sin that was constantly spreading. It was the weapon of a great soul overlord. It was the natal weapon of a great soul overlord. She breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at Hutu, who kept pulling the bow and piercing a cavalry of death with each arrow. Darkness swirled in her eyes. Buzz her will surged. The black spear floated in the air. The tip was pointed at Hutu. The next moment, the black orb that looked like an eyeball in Soul's hand began to spin. Buzz, the spear shook and tore through the void in an instant. Hutu drew his bow and shot arrows at an incredible speed. Each arrow pierced through a horseman of death. However, as Pai Dong, Pai Shi, and the chaotic saint approached, she felt more and more pressure. With a turn of his body, a circle of arrow light shot out. This move was called 10,000 arrows. Boom, boom, boom. A circle of steel cavalry was forced to retreat. Suddenly, Hotu's heart trembled. His eyelashes slightly trembled as he raised his head to look over, only to discover a black light approaching in an instant. The terrifying power of Sin wrapped around the spear, causing goosebumps to appear on her skin. This is, Hotu's pupils constricted. He wanted to hide. However, the two brothers, Pai Dong and Pai Shi, came closer and blocked Hotu's retreat. Hotu roared. His aura soared to the heavens. Blood splattered everywhere. Hotu's pupils constricted as his body was pierced by a spear. The bow of bliss was tossed away and smashed into the distance, turning into light and dispersing. All the nobles who were spying in the dark gasped in disbelief. Some of the experts who originally belonged to Hotu's camp were even saddened. Sure enough, Hotu had failed. She was nailed to the ruins by the spear, but she jerked it forward and pulled it out. Her wounds healed rapidly, and her face turned pale. Cursed goddess soul was too well prepared. A cold gleam emerged in Hotu's eyes. The next moment, she crushed a jade talisman inscribed with mysterious patterns. Rumble! Just as the two brothers were about to land the killing blow, the jade talisman shattered. The jade talisman shattered, and a resplendent light suddenly filled everyone's eyes. What's that? The two brothers, Pai Dong and Pai Shi, felt their bodies tighten. It was a wriggling figure. Its upper body was a graceful figure, and its lower body was a long and narrow snake tail. She flicked her finger. A terrible aura spread out in all directions. Ripples spread out in all directions. Countless steel cavalry were crushed to pieces by this move. Countless cavalrymen were crushed into dust by this move. Soul raised her hand and grabbed the spear shrouded in the power of Sin. Cursed goddess Soul raised her hand and grabbed the spear, which was surrounded by the power of Sin. A peak chaotic saint of the primitive universe. Rumble, the terrible energy dissipated. The cursed goddess palace was reduced to ruins. Hotu, who was seriously injured, had disappeared. Obviously, she had escaped with the help of the attack just now. Soul's face was indifferent. She raised her hand and the orb stopped spinning. Then, she guided it with her mental force and locked onto the direction in which Hotu had disappeared. That direction, she looked in the direction of the restaurant, her eyes gleaming fiercely. You stood in front of the restaurant with little Hu in her arms. The white beam of light faded away. 3 figures emerged in front of the restaurant. Hades' Era's shirt was unbuttoned as he sauntered over. When he saw you, he burst out laughing. Nethery, your reinforcements are here. Lord Dog strode forward with his graceful cat-like steps, walking over at a steady pace. Outside the restaurant, the pupils of the cavalry of death constricted, and the chaotic saint who led the group felt his scalp go numb. Oh, so that's the man who threatened you? I am Nethery's backer. Bullying her is the same as bullying I. Hades' Era paused and turned to look at the cavalry of death in the distance. His eyes lit up. The next moment, Hades' Era's figure disappeared in a flash. He reappeared in front of the chaotic saint. Come, come, come. Fight I for 300 rounds, said Hades' Era, patting his bare chest. The chaotic saint's pupils constricted. The next moment, he roared. His long knife swept out and slashed Hades' Era's body. With a ripping sound, the knife sank several centimeters into his body. You! The chaotic saint's pupils constricted. He was taken aback. He never thought that the slutty fellow in front of him would not dodge and let himself be hit by his knife. Then, the chaotic saint was wild with joy. How arrogant! You're courting death. Rumble! The power of the curse exploded. It was going to tear Hades' Era's body to pieces. Ouch! Use more strength. Haven't you eaten? Come and cut me. Hades' Era's eyes were blurred as he shouted in a trembling voice. Is he crazy? This man must be crazy. The chaotic saint did not know what to say. He wanted to pull out his knife. With a ripping sound, the knife was pulled out. However, the man's body healed rapidly and became perfect in a flash. You're so weak, just like a girl. Boring. Hades' era twitched his mouth. The next moment, he raised his hand and grabbed the chaotic saint's face. A loud bang resounded. The chaotic saint was pressed to the ground and the ground caved in. Hades' era stuck out his butt and pushed forward. Bam! 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 The ground burst open, exploding continuously. The surrounding cavalry of death felt a pang of fear. Nether King Erha laughed, making people feel that he was a madman. However, this madman's strength was unexpectedly strong. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang looked at Hades' era. Lord Go was also watching calmly. After all, these cavalry of death were nothing to them. Damn it! There's someone more slutty than me? I've met my match. Marquis Langu's jaw dropped as he shook the rattle drum unconsciously. Lord Go narrowed his eyes. The cavalry of death was about to trample on Hades' era. However, he was shocked to find that they could not move at all. Strands of the law of time wrapped around their bodies. Lord Go slowly waved his paw. Buzz, the beasts beneath the cavalry of death turned into embryos one after another, and the experts sat on the ground with a stunned look on their faces. Damn it! Where are our little beasts? They jumped to their feet, their hair standing on end. Ah ha ha ha! Hades' era grabbed the chaotic saint and kept throwing him to the ground, which kept crumbling. His crazed appearance made the group of people speechless. Viscount Ash, Master Jinyong, and the others were startled. What happened? Why are the cavalry of death being attacked? Does this chef want to die? There was no way Lord Soul would let them go. However, when they saw Hades' era's crazy look, they were stunned. How could he be so violent? Lord Go frowned. He glanced up at the sky. The next moment, he waved his paw again and pressed it down. Bam! The armors of many cavalry of death burst into pieces. Then, they turned into broken souls and drifted away. Some of the cavalry of death escaped the paw. They were quite strong among the saints of the Great Path. However, it was useless. They were all in a sorry state. Xiao Bai stood behind you, his mechanical eyes flashing. His belly turned into a black hole, and a great suction force burst out. Immediately, the broken souls of the cavalry of death were sucked away. Viscount Ash and Master Jinyong did not know what to say. With the help of two Duke-level experts, was this still Her Excellency Nethery, who was the weakest of them all? Especially that dog, who could control time and turn a savage beast into an embryo with just a thought. This was too cool. Buzz, the void twisted. Bufang focused his eyes and you paused. Over there, a graceful figure staggered out of the void, took a few steps, and panted violently. Oh? The cursed goddess, Hutu? Bufang was taken aback. Yu was also taken aback. From the looks of it, she was seriously injured. Was Hutu not prepared to face Soul? Or could it be that Soul's strength was beyond her imagination? Rumble. Right at this moment, the sky in the distance trembled violently. A terrifying black cloud swept over, and the black cloud roiled. Soul hovered in midair, her black veil fluttering, holding a round black ball in her hand as she stared coldly at Bufang. Behind her, tens of thousands of cavalry of death were galloping through the void. A great pressure came pressing down on them in an instant. Hades' era flung the chaotic saint away with a lifeless look on his face and fell to the ground. Bufang boy, I told you to call an army of 100,000. The corner of Hades' era's mouth twitched. With an army of 100,000, we won't look weak. You held Hutu. Her face was pale, and the power of sin was swirling around her face. She has a soul demon weapon in her hand. Be careful, Hutu said. She had fallen into the soul demon weapons trap. The soul demon weapon used by a great soul overlord was extremely powerful and vicious. Hades' era's figure flickered and appeared at Yu's side. Beauty, you need help. You need the impact of a rich life force. Hades' era said seriously. The power of sin was eroding Hutu's life force. Hades' era felt that he was very important at the moment. Go away. Bufang walked over and dragged Hades' era away. With a shake of his hand, he handed an oyster pancake to Hutu. She did not refuse and took a bite. The power of sin in her was immediately suppressed. Beauty, my life force impact is actually more useful than Bufang Boy's bag. Do you want to give it a try? Hades' era said reluctantly. Hutu gave Bufang a strange look, as if she was asking where this fool came from. In midair, cursed goddess Soul hovered in midair. She was holding a spear wrapped in the power of sin. She swung it and pointed it at Bufang. Stinky chef, I didn't expect you to call for help, but do you think 2 Duke-level experts can save you? Soul said coldly, her voice brimming with killing intent. She had wanted to deal with Hutu first, but she did not expect that you would really become a threat. Beauty, I can see that you are haunted by the power of sin. Do you need I's life force to cleanse you? Do you need I to help you? Hades' era looked up at Soul and shouted. Viscount Ash, Master Jinyong, Marquis Langu, and the others were all dumbfounded. This guy is so coquettish? Lord Go's forehead bulged slightly. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched, his face expressionless. You rolled her eyes, while little Hu in her arms slapped his face helplessly with his little paw. What a waste of money! Soul ignored Hades' era. In the next moment, her eyes turned pitch black. Bam! 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 Her will rumbled. The ground beneath Void City exploded in an instant. Chapter 1760. Bam! 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 A terrible explosion rang out and lingered in the whole Void City. The whole city was enveloped in a huge plume of black smoke. The ground shook violently. Rubble rolled down from the sky, and broken buildings collapsed and shattered. Rumble! The ground of Void City was an inverted cone-shaped planet. However, at this moment, the planet was full of broken holes. It looked as if it had been corroded by insects, which made one's hair stand on end. And this was not the end. Shadows flashed through the holes. District D, it was another day of dark cuisine in the district. Countless exiles crowded crazily in front of the city wall of District C. Huge wooden carts drove out of the city. Someone scooped out grayish-black liquid food and threw it to the exiles. These people were like pigs being fed. However, these exiles were already numb to it. After being trapped in District D for so many years, they had long lost their souls. Suddenly, during the feeding process, the ground of District D exploded. With a bang, it shattered with a loud bang. The tremor startled the experts on the wooden carts, and many of them turned to look. A huge, circular pit had appeared in the ground of District D. The pit was huge. In the pit, inside, one black figure after another floated up into the air. Some of them were in human form, while some were in the shape of savage beasts. Without exception, all of them were surrounded by the terrible power of sin. Who are you? The experts on the wooden carts roared. They were not only responsible for feeding the exiles, but also for maintaining order. The Black Armor Army arrived at full speed. In a flash, they surrounded these experts. Outside Void City, the corner of the black-robed man holding the hourglass twitched slightly. Holding the hourglass, he took a step forward. Buzz, his figure disappeared. The next time he appeared, he was slowly floating up from the huge pit in District D. A terrible and suffocating aura spread out in an instant. The Black Armor Army was struck dumb. It's just as Soul said. District D is the real treasure. The black-robed man hovering in midair said faintly. His voice was very gentle and peaceful. However, it was completely different from the terrifying sinful energy that surrounded him. His aura caused the black-armored guards to not even have the courage to resist. A duke, one of the black-armored guards narrowed his eyes. He didn't expect this at all. Intruder! Someone is invading Void City? The black-armored guards, who were so intimidated by the aura that they did not dare to move, suddenly roared. After all, they were from Void City. One of the black-armored guards frantically tried to flee. The other black-armored guards wanted to block the person in front of them. A dense group of black-armored guards rushed out. The power of the curse almost caused the river of curse to explode. However, the black-robed man holding the hourglass smiled faintly. Raising his hand, he pointed out with a sharp finger. Behind him, terrifying sinful energy surged out, instantly wrapping around every single black armor guard. It corroded into their bodies. The black-armored guards howled and turned into souls. Behind the black-robed man, the eyes of some numbered soul demons and ordinary soul overlords suddenly turned scarlet. Then, these souls were devoured. Holding the hourglass, the black-robed man looked tenderly at the bewildered exiles of District D. "Your freedom now belongs to me," he said. "Your freedom now belongs to me." As soon as he finished speaking, the sinful energy behind him surged, and a cloud of black smoke spread out in all directions, turning into countless tiny black snakes that darted toward the exiles of District D. The eyes of these exiles turned scarlet in an instant, and the sinful energy wrapped around them. Rumble! The gates of District C opened with a rumble. A chaotic saint dashed out. Surrounded by chaotic energy, he was a guardian of the district. Although he was not a duke or marquis, he was at least a chaotic saint. "How dare you!" The guardian rushed out and bellowed. Then, he froze. Because at this moment, he was facing tens of thousands of crazy experts of District D. What's going on? The guardian felt a chill run down his spine. He wanted to return to District C. However, at the intersection of the retreat, a black-robed man holding an hourglass had appeared at some point. The black-robed man just waved his hand at him. An irresistible force knocked him flying backward and into the crowd. A miserable howl rang out. The experts of District D rushed toward him like crazy. District C, District B, and District A. The ground of every district was blasted open. In District C, Countess Xiaoqiu focused her eyes and her heart skipped a beat. The black dragon roared into the sky. She stood valiantly on its back. Countess Adong appeared on her divine phoenix, her face grave. Riding a colorful divine deer, Countess Looming stood in front of the district. Inside the pit, one shadow after another floated out of it. The sinful qi immediately pervaded District C. Compared to District D, the defense of District C was much stronger. The nobles and the guards of the counts had formed a line of defense to fight against these invading soul demons. Buzz! Suddenly, the three counts focused their eyes. Even though they had a grudge against each other, they could not help but share a common enemy at this moment. They looked at each other, feeling uneasy. Countess Xiaoqiu was the strongest. However, at this moment, she was also a little confused. Rumble! The pit shook violently as if thousands of soldiers were rushing out of it. What's that? Countess Xiaoqiu froze. Then, one head after another emerged from the pit. One figure after another crawled out of it. Their clothes were shabby, and their aura was disgusting. They were no strangers to them. They were the exiles of District D. Why did the people of District D come to District C? Oh no! District D's population was too large. If they all rushed into District C, it would be a disaster for the district. Kill them! At this moment, Countess Xiaoqiu had to give the order to kill the experts of District D, who had lost their minds. All kinds of light beams shot out of the pit. It swept across in an instant. Countless experts of District D were like wheat being cut down, and a large number of them were cut down. The smell of blood permeated the whole district. The black-robed man emerged. He was holding the hourglass of time and space, which was already halfway through its rotation. A great soul overlord of the soul demon universe. Countess Xiaoqiu focused her eyes and saw the black-robed man holding the hourglass. The expressions of Countess Adong and Countess Looming changed dramatically. A great soul overlord? That was an expert equivalent to a duke-level expert. How could they stop such an expert? Run! Go to District A. Countess Xiaoqiu said. She patted the black dragon on the head. The next moment, the black dragon soared into the sky and spewed out black flames that filled the sky. A look of horror came over Countess Adong and Countess Luming's faces. At this moment, they had no other way out. Run? You can't. The black-robed man smiled gently. Then, he reached out a hand and swung it. A huge black circle emerged. With a flick of his finger, the circle spread rapidly. Then, it flew toward the 3 count. The black dragon sped across the void. The divine deer neighed, and the divine phoenix soared into the sky. Countess Xiaoqiu was the fastest. She rushed into District D in a flash, followed by Countess Luming. Countess Aitong's expression changed. The black circle had covered her. The divine phoenix let out a miserable howl. That was a chaotic saint-level divine phoenix. Its feathers fell, and blood dripped from its body. Then, the divine phoenix gave Countess Adong a hard push with her head, pushing her into District D. The next moment, the black circle covered her. The divine phoenix's body froze in an instant, and her body was a bloody mess. Countless soul demons rushed over and tore at the divine phoenix. Boom! The black circle smashed into the wall of the district. The wall shook, collapsed, and a circle emerged. The city wall of Void City is indeed unbreakable, the black-robed man murmured. No wonder Soul said to attack from below, the black-robed man mumbled. Although the ground was thick, its defense was not as strong as the city wall. Well, it's time to help Soul. It's time for her to sit on the throne of Void City. The black-robed man grinned. Then, he drifted toward District A. The sudden change left all the nobles dumbfounded. They never thought that one day Void City would be invaded. Where was the queen? Where was the queen of curses? Why hadn't the queen made a move? Where were the 3 dukes? The nobles had gone crazy. The center of District A collapsed, and a huge pit emerged. Countless shadows rushed out of it. The pit happened to be not far from the restaurant. Around the restaurant, the experts of the alchemy workshop, Viscount Ash's guards, Marquis Langu, and the others were all stunned, their eyes filled with horror. Void City was their place of survival. However, they could not believe that such a huge hole had been created in the city today. Do you think you're the only one with help? In midair, Cursed Goddess Soul smiled faintly. One shadow after another soared into the sky and hovered behind her, making her power stronger and stronger. They seemed to have turned into a dark cloud that blotted out the sky, rolling toward the restaurant. In the restaurant, Bufang frowned. Hades' Era grinned. The Lord Go's eyes were filled with killing intent. Yu's eyes were cold, and smoke was rising from the mouth of the little Huli in her arms. The little girl standing next to Yu twitched her mouth. Soul demons. Bufang exhaled as he looked at the soul demons. Soul's help was indeed a soul demon. I really didn't expect you to find 2 Duke-level experts. But do you think you can sit back and relax with this? If you had a 1% chance before, you will lose now. Cursed Goddess Soul said, looking at her. Bam! 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 Behind her, one soul overlord after another emerged, emanating a terrible aura. There were even soul overlords whose auras had stepped into the realm of chaotic saints. Compared to Yu's side, in addition to Lord Go and Hades' Era, there were also Marquis Langu, Viscount Ash and Master Zhenyong, who had just broken through. The others were simply too weak to stand on the stage. The forces on both sides were not at the same level. Countless nobles had already chosen a side. Without hesitation, he chose Cursed Goddess Soul. If they did not make a choice, they would be torn apart and devoured by the soul demons. Therefore, they chose Cursed Goddess Soul. Even if they chose Yu's side, they would still die in the end. Cursed Goddess Soul was very confident that everything was under her control. Suddenly, her face froze. There was no aura of despair in the restaurant. In fact, the atmosphere was a little strange. Oh! Soul demons, what a bunch of soul demons! I'm so scared, Hades' Era grinned. He sneered without hesitation. Lord Go, on the other hand, was licking his paws, eager to join the fight. The corner of Bu Fang's mouth twitched. Soul demons, I have the most experience in dealing with soul demons. It's time for the dark cuisine to come in handy. Chapter 1761. Oh, what's that chef talking about? What does the soul demon have to do with dark cuisine? Bu Fang's words stunned many people, especially those nobles who had tasted dark cuisine. Viscount Ash and Master Jin Yong also gave Bu Fang a deep look, their eyes somewhat inexplicable. Cursed Goddess Soul did not mind. She thought it was all Bu Fang's last struggle. Now that she had the upper hand and victory in her hands, she did not need to worry at all. Behind her, countless soul demons hovered in the air, and this was not her limit. The method she had set up for the great soul overlord could even allow her to directly control Void City. In fact, we are indeed at a disadvantage, little Loli said. Of course, she did not look like she was at a disadvantage at all. Of course, I don't need you to tell me that. I saw through the truth at a glance. Hades' Era rolled his eyes. He did not care about the countless soul demons, but the main problem was that there were too many of them, and there were even chaotic saint-level soul demons among them. In comparison, this was a little more troublesome. Rumble. All of a sudden, the ground began to shake. In the distance, a black dragon sped across the sky, and several figures descended from the sky. Many people froze. Some nobles who had already taken Soul's side sucked in their breaths. Those who were fleeing in panic were none other than Countess Xia Qiu and the others. Marchioness Ruoxue, standing behind Soul, also felt a little strange. Rumble. The black dragon landed on the ground and slashed its claws across the ground. It bared its teeth, its nostrils exuding hot air, and black flames darted out of its mouth. Countess Xia Qiu's face was livid. Countess Xia Qiu helped Countess Adong up. Although they were not on good terms before, they were now united against a common enemy. The three counts landed in front of the restaurant. They landed in front of the restaurant. Under the puzzled gazes of many nobles. I can't believe three counts chose Yu's side. What's going on? Countess Adong and Countess Luming clearly chose Soul's side in the beginning. You've gone too far. Countess Xia Qiu glanced coldly at Soul in the sky. They had worked with the soul demons to destroy Void City's defenses. All the exiles in District D were released and trampled on District B and District C. You clearly had victory in your grasp. All you needed to do was to sit on the throne. Why did you do such a thing? Countess Xia Qiu gritted her teeth, and anger surged in her eyes. Many nobles did not quite understand. I want revenge. Countess Itong's eyes were filled with tears of anger. At the level of a chaotic saint, it was rare for one to shed tears. However, Countess Adong could not help but cry when the divine phoenix was devoured. Cursed Goddess Soul? She had let down the divine phoenix. Countess Dear Cry also shook her head. Obviously, she was very, very disappointed in Soul. Rumble in the distance. The rumbling sound rang out once more. Many people sucked in a breath of cold air because an even more terrifying scene suddenly surged out in front of them. The densely packed experts with tattered clothes that looked like they had crawled out of mud. Aren't they the exiles from District D? Some of them are burdened with sins. These people were being punished in Void City. But why did these people appear here? Many people were not stupid. Thinking of Countess Xia Qiu's words, they guessed a fact that made their hair stand on end. This is crazy. In midair, a black-robed man slowly drifted over. He was holding an hourglass in his hand. The golden sand in the hourglass kept flowing. Beneath this person's feet, there was a huge black divine phoenix burning with sinful flames, spreading its wings. Countess Itong's eyes widened as she watched. That was her holy divine phoenix. How could it be reduced to such a sinful state? Its once bright feathers and sacred aura were gone. It had fallen into depravity. Bufang let the 3 counts into the restaurant. At this moment, the entire restaurant had been completely surrounded by enemies. After eating the oyster pancake, Huda's aura had recovered a lot. She breathed a sigh of relief. I didn't expect this woman to be so extreme. She can't wait to sit on the throne of Void City and influence the war between the universes. Once she sits on the throne, the war between the primitive universe and the soul demon universe will change completely, cursed goddess Huda said. It's okay. She can't sit on the throne. That seat belongs to Nethery. Hades' Era grinned. Don't worry, beauty. With I here, I will protect you. Huda glanced at Hades' Era as if she was looking at a fool. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. She is also one of the contenders for the throne. Bufang gave Hades' Era some knowledge. Hades' Era's face froze. He scratched the back of his head with a dry smile. Rumble. A terrible aura spread and descended upon the whole world. The oppressive aura made the faces of Countess Xiaqiu and the others extremely unsightly. Soul demons, exiles, cavalry of death, great soul overlords, cursed goddess soul's power was really too strong. Lord Go stared at the great soul overlord, who was holding the hourglass, and narrowed his eyes slightly. In the Queen of Curses palace, in the chaotic domain, countless petals were flying in all directions, cutting everything and tearing the void. Rumble. The power of curses collided and spread out. 3 figures drifted into the distance. Duchess Yunlan and Duchess Nightmare had joined forces. Even though they were pulled into the domain by Duchess Tianlian, who was 1 step ahead of them, they could still fight back. They exchanged a glance and saw the grave look in each other's eyes. Trapped in the domain, they could not sense what was happening outside at all. Being trapped in this domain, the 2 of them couldn't sense what was happening outside at all. They had no idea how Hudu and you were doing. But they all knew one thing. Since Duchess Tianlian had used such a trick, it meant that Soul was absolutely confident that she could kill Hudu and you. Otherwise, there was no point in starting this war. Oh! Suddenly, Duchess Tianlian, who was supporting the domain, frowned. The whole domain seemed to tremble slightly. Seizing the opportunity, Duchess Nightmare and Duchess Yunlan unleashed powerful attacks and found a breakthrough point. Flatten this restaurant. I've killed 2 cursed goddesses. I alone am enough for Void City to have 1 cursed goddess. In midair, cursed goddess Soul waved her arm and commanded the army to launch an attack. The moment she made her move, the whole void began to boil. The cavalry of death roared, and a terrible aura rumbled. The army of soul demons was buzzing too. The eyes of the exiles were scarlet as if their minds were being controlled, and the power of sin swirled around them as they flew madly toward the restaurant. Bufang rubbed his head. In fact, Bufang did not like wars. He just wanted to open a restaurant in peace. But he did not expect that someone would always come looking for trouble. It's time to strike. Marquis Langu grabbed the rattle and shook it. He glanced at Hades' Era from the corner of his eyes. He had to win against this guy. Hades' Era narrowed his eyes as if he sensed Marquis Langu's gaze. Don't look, I don't want men to be silver. The corner of Marquis Langu's mouth twitched. In the next instant, he took a step forward. Boom. His body suddenly grew bigger, and his clothes were torn apart. It turned into a huge beast the size of a mountain. He slapped down. Bang! Many of the exiles perished under his palm. As soon as Soul gave the order, cursed goddess Soul's eyes widened. The experts in the restaurant also made their move. Lord Go levitated in the void with graceful cat-like steps and swung his exquisite doggy paw. Viscount Ash held an ice longbow in her hand. She kept shooting arrows, and each arrow froze a figure in the air. Master Zhen Yong, on the other hand, was more direct. Then, she took out a bottle and crushed it. One pill after another flew out of it, and with a flick of her finger, they flew toward the exiles in the distance. The pills exploded and turned all the experts into ashes. Roaring, the army of soul demons approached. Bufang stepped on the void and floated up into the sky. Yu and Xiao Ai paused. The little girl narrowed her eyes. What is this chef going to do? Leave the soul demons to me, he said. Bufang said. His voice was full of confidence. He had his own way to deal with the soul demons. Boom, boom, boom. One soul demon after another tore through the void. There were numbered soul demons, top soul demons, soul overlords, and top soul overlords. A terrible aura distorted the void. In an instant, Void City had turned into a battlefield. The sound of explosions and fighting rang out everywhere. Bufang appeared and took a step forward. He was facing tens of thousands of soul demons alone. The scene was somewhat sad and spectacular. Countess Xia Qiu and the others wanted to help, but to their surprise, Bufang refused. Is this chef going to fight so many soul demons alone? Those are soul demons. They are the most difficult and disgusting creatures to deal with in many universes. However, since this chef dares to face them, perhaps he really has a way to deal with them. Therefore, Countess Xia Qiu and the others turned to fight the cavalry of death. Rumble! A collision ensued. Although they were outnumbered, their fighting prowess was high. For a moment, the situation was at a stalemate. In midair, Bufang's hand shook. The black turtle constellation wok appeared in his hand. These days, Bufang had been studying dark cuisine. Now was the perfect time to give it a try. Compared with stinky tofu, dark cuisine might be stronger. Perhaps it was just right for these soul demons. As the soul demons approached, at the same time, Bufang's movements began. Buzz, he tossed one herring after another into the air. Bufang's movements were as fast as lightning. By manipulating time, Bufang finished cooking a lot of dark cuisine in almost an instant. Under normal circumstances, Bufang did not like to control the flow of time when cooking, because it would affect the taste and quality of the ingredients. However, this was an emergency. Numerous stargazy pie cans floated around Bufang. 1, 2, 3, there were so many of them that they piled up around him. Each of the stargazy pie cans raised its head high, and their eyes shone brightly. It was as if they were eager to fight. Bufang turned his head and looked at Little Hu in Yu's arms. Bufang beckoned. Little Hu's eyes reflected the stargazy pie cans around Bufang. He rolled his eyes and pretended to faint in Yu's arms. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. He wanted Little Hu to swallow the stargazy pie and spit it out like a soul demon meatball. However, the latter pretended to be dead. So Bufang had to do it himself. The army of soul demons was getting closer and closer. Bufang's body floated in midair. The mental force of the starry sky surged. The hem of his vermilion robe fluttered. Then, Bufang raised a finger. Facing the army of soul demons, he slowly pointed his finger forward. Rumble! The stargazy pie cans shot out like frisbees. A strong stench gathered into a river and rushed toward the army of soul demons. In an instant, they collided with the army of soul demons. Then, a scene that left everyone dumbfounded happened. Chapter 1762. Cursed Goddess Soul's strongest power was the army of soul demons. It had to be the army of soul demons. Compared to the cavalry of death, and even the exiles of District D, the army of soul demons had a great advantage. Not only were they powerful, but they also had a strong defense. Moreover, they were not easily obliterated. Why had the soul demon universe dominated many universes for so many years? Why could they invade many universes and turn them into ruins? Why could they devour the resources of other universes and kill the humans of other universes? It was all because of the army of soul demons. They were the sharp blades of the great soul overlords, the solid fighting force of the supreme soul god. Their terror struck fear into the hearts of countless people. However, today, all these stereotypes seem to have been broken by Bufang. He was not even a saint of the Great Path, and yet he dared to face the army of soul demons alone. Was he not courting death? Cursed goddess Soul sneered in the sky. The soul demons were her strongest trump card. What could a mere chef do to them? Fighting against thousands of soul demons alone? Did this chef think he was the queen of curses? Many nobles thought the same. Although they were amazed by the chef's magical means, no one thought that Bufang could survive the attack of so many soul demons. In their opinion, Bufang's fearlessness of death was extremely stupid. The soul demons were disgusting, evil, and terrible. Countless people were terrified by their names. They were numbered soul demons, the top soul demons, and even soul overlords. They all swooped down on Bufang. Bufang was just a mantis trying to stop a chariot. However, soon, something that many people could not believe happened. The chef was cooking in front of the soul demons. With just a thought, he finished cooking, and one dark dish after another flew around him. They were very familiar with those dark dishes. After all, Bufang's reputation in the whole Void City was extraordinary now. His dark dishes were also something that amazed countless people. The Stargazy Pie, the 18 Hell Curry, and the Death Spicy Strip. They were all familiar with these dark dishes. However, they had never thought that these dark dishes could be used as weapons. Moreover, they were used to fight the soul demons. If soul demons were so easy to deal with, would there still be any trace of them in the universe? Dark cuisine. Soul hovered in midair, her black veil fluttering in the wind as she narrowed her eyes. Even though he was surprised, he didn't think much of it. In the void, the black-robed great soul overlord, who was holding the hourglass, gave Bufang an indifferent glance. Suddenly, the black-robed man let out a soft cry of surprise. He seemed to have thought of something. It seemed that Pride Great Soul Overlord had been killed by a chef. What was the connection between chef and chef? The fall of Pride Great Soul Overlord set off a violent wave in the soul demon universe. Originally, there were 7 great soul overlords, but now there were only 6 left. Fortunately, Pride Great Soul Overlord had been blessed by the sleeping soul god and was now slowly recovering. They shouldn't be the same chef. This chef's strength is too different. The black-robed man shook his head indifferently. He turned to look at Jean once more. That dog, that slutty and cheap guy. He should not be from Void City. His fighting prowess is comparable to that of a Duke-level expert. Both of them are existences who can fend off an army alone. This is going to be tricky. The black-robed man narrowed his eyes slightly. Then, he raised his hand and rubbed the hourglass. The next moment, his body slowly turned blurry. Then, a clone appeared on each side of him. The clone's robe fluttered, but he was not holding the hourglass. Buzz, the clone disappeared in an instant. The next moment, he appeared in front of Lord Go and Hades' era. Lord Go's fighting prowess was outstanding now. After all, he was a heaven god in the chaos space. With a slap of his paw, he could wipe out a large number of cavalry of death. Nether King Ha's current strength wasn't weaker than Lord Dog's. Moreover, he had a flirtatious fighting style. Coupled with his slut fighting style, it made the enemy's hearts palpitate. Marquis Langu, the great demon, could not help but feel a little anxious as he watched. He really did not seem to be as slutty as that guy. The void trembled. Lord Go and Hades' era were knocked flying away. They focused their eyes and looked over. They found that a black-robed man had appeared in front of them. The black-robed man had stopped them, and they began to fight. The starry sky gazes. Bufang looked up with a deep look in his eyes. The air was filled with an extremely pungent stench, so bad that it seemed the whole void was about to collapse. Go! Bufang waved his finger and pointed forward. The next moment, the starry sky gazes turned into shooting stars and shot out at high speed. The soul demons did not care about this at all. They only had eyes for Bufang, and they wanted to tear Bufang to pieces. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, the starry sky gazes collided with the soul demons. Countless starry sky gazes spun. The herring heads among them had bright eyes. Every soul demon was attracted by them. Their noses twitched, and when the stench entered their nostrils, they actually felt that it was like a fragrance. It was the ultimate fragrance, an alluring fragrance. The soul demon's eyes burst into dazzling light. A soul demon could not wait to grab a starry sky gazes. He stretched out a claw and grabbed the herring head that had popped up. With a slurp, the herring was pulled out, and the taste of the canned food inside surged. Oh! Every soul demon let out a cry of ecstasy. Damn it! How can it smell so good? The soul demons felt as if their bones had melted. Slurp! A soul demon picked up a herring by its tail and put it into his mouth. The stench of the herring that was pulled out of the starry sky gazes was comparable to that of a nuclear bomb. However, these soul demons were not afraid. They could not wait to open their mouths and shove the herring into their mouth. Slurp, slurp, slurp. All the starry sky gazes were divided and eaten. They were so excited that they even forgot to fight. Below the restaurant, Xiao Ai and the others in the restaurant were dumbfounded. The little girl, on the other hand, twitched her mouth. I knew it. After being stunned for a while, Xiao Ai became very excited. Owner Boo, you did a good job. As long as he can hold off the army of soul demons, we still have a chance. Huda's face was also filled with astonishment. She never thought that Bufang's dark cuisine could have such an effect. Or perhaps, the nemesis of the soul demons was food? No one had expected this. After all, the soul demons had conquered many universes, and this was the first time they had met their nemesis. Cursed Goddess Soul was stunned. So were the nobles around her. The army of soul demons was stopped just like that? They were tempted by the food and stopped attacking? If this chef keeps cooking this starry sky gazes, will these soul demons never attack? One of the nobles murmured. Bufang seemed to hear the murmur. The corner of his mouth twitched. Keep cooking? Do these soul demons deserve it? Bufang said faintly. His voice rang out. Bufang clasped his hands behind his back. His vermilion robe and hair fluttered behind him. He stood alone in front of the many soul demons. He looked like a little sheep in front of many demons. Bufang raised his hand. The hem of his vermilion robe drooped down. Then, Bufang snapped his fingers. Crack! Explode! Bufang said lightly. His voice rang out. The soul demons who had eaten the starry sky gazes paused in an instant. One by one, they raised their heads and roared. Many people were stunned. A soul overlord soul demon covered his throat with one hand and let out a furious roar. The half-eaten starry sky gazes in his hand fell from the air. He was not just a soul overlord. All the other soul demons were the same. All the soul demons who had eaten the starry sky gazes covered their throats with their hands. At Bufang's order, in the blink of an eye, these soul demons' bodies exploded. Boom! Boom! The explosions swept across the sky in an instant. The soul demons' bodies began to swell, and crimson flames began to emerge from their insides. Their bodies were incinerated, and their remnant souls were turned to ashes by the divine flame. The mighty army of soul demons was defeated in an instant. Stunned, terrified, creepy, the experts of Void City were dumbfounded. That was an army of soul demons. Even the army of Void City might not be able to deal with them. And the result? They were killed by this little chef with a dish? The starry sky gazes killed so many soul demons? How was that possible? Looking at the soul demons who had exploded or spontaneously combusted, some of the people who had participated in the Dark Cuisine Challenge felt a chill run down their spines. They were afraid that they would suddenly explode as well. Was that food really poisonous? Bufang seemed to sense the panic in the crowd. Bufang twitched his mouth. Don't worry. These dark cuisines are only designed to restrain soul demons. Bufang said. His words made many people feel a lot more at ease. However, they were only a little relieved. Who knew if Bufang was lying to them? They could not believe the chef's words now. The army of soul demons was too large. Even with the help of the starry sky gazes, more and more soul demons rushed out of the explosions. Soon, a dark mass swept across heaven and earth. After the initial worry, cursed goddess Soul breathed a sigh of relief. It's just a dish. The strength of soul demons is beyond your imagination. Rumble. As soon as her voice rang out, 3 soul overlords sped toward Bufang. Their goal was to interrupt Bufang and prevent Bufang from cooking the dark cuisine. The soul demons were not stupid. They also recognized that Bufang's dark cuisine seemed to be a fatal temptation to them. If they wanted to stop all this, they just had to stop the chef from cooking. The 3 soul overlords were equivalent to 3 saints of the Great Path. If it were in the past, Bufang might have found it a little tricky to deal with. However, Bufang was no longer what he used to be, whether it was in terms of strength or cooking skills. He shook his hand. 3 spicy strips emerged in front of him. Chili sauce that looked like Earth Prison's fire flowed over them. Death spicy strip. Let me understand, Bufang said. As soon as he said that, Bufang threw out the 3 spicy strip. With a ripping sound, the strips were stuffed into the mouths of the 3 soul overlords. Rumble. The eyes of the 3 soul overlords widened in an instant. You can't bite them. You can't eat them. You have to hold back. You can't eat human food. Why does it smell so good? Even if it smells good, you have to hold back. The 3 soul overlords' eyes were wide with fear. But at last, they could not hold back anymore. Their huge mouths and sharp teeth snapped shut. Slurp. The spicy strips were broken in an instant. Slurp, slurp. Why is it so delicious? I feel that my soul is soaring in the universe. I seem to see Lord Soul God waving at me. The 3 soul demons held the spicy strips in their hands and ate happily. Their perseverance was shattered by the deliciousness of the death spicy strips. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. The black turtle constellation walk appeared. He pointed his finger forward. The black turtle constellation walk knocked the 3 soul overlords flying. Bang! Bang! The fire burned brightly. In an instant, the 3 soul overlords turned into ashes. The 3 soul overlords, who were all saints of the Great Path, were killed in an instant. Everyone was stunned. Cursed Goddess Soul felt that she had been slapped in the face. Other than the stargazy pie, what the hell was this spicy strip? In the distance, Hades' Era, who was fighting with the black-robed man, went crazy. With a single slap, the clone of the black-robed man was sent flying. His eyes seemed to be spewing fire. I think I smell spicy strips? Bufang young man. I smell spicy strips. Nether King Air Ha's body spun 360 degrees in the air. With a kick in front of the black-cloaked man, he slowly swam toward Bufang's position. Bufang young man. I know you have spicy strips. Give me one, and I will accompany you. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. Marquis Langgu's pupils constricted. I've been fooled by this guy again. In midair, the great soul overlord holding the hourglass narrowed his eyes. With a sway of his body, he teleported in front of Bufang in a flash. Chapter 1763. His vision went dark. Bufang's pupils constricted. He felt an ice-cold aura enveloping his body in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the black-robed man appeared in front of him. In the distance, the army of soul demons had stopped moving. It seemed that the appearance of the black-robed man had deterred them from moving forward. Some soul demons, who were drooling, hurriedly wiped their saliva away. The black-robed man hovered in midair. He looked at Bufang condescendingly. It gave Bufang an incomparable pressure, and this pressure made Bufang squint his eyes involuntarily. The soul demons in the army were all sucking in their saliva. Using food to stop my army of tens of thousands of soul demons. You chef, the black-robed man said, holding the hourglass in one hand. However, before he could finish his words, a figure flew toward him like a shooting star. Boom! Hades' era, who had been swimming for a long time, finally arrived. He landed in midair, charged forward, and knocked the black figure away. Bufang, young man. Spicy strips. Spicy strips. I smell spicy strips. It's a new spicy strip, not the old one. Why didn't you come to I when you have a new spicy strip? As a loyal fan of spicy strips, I feel heartache for you. Hades' era grabbed Bufang's shoulder and shook him. The black-robed man, who was knocked away, was somewhat dumbfounded. After stabilizing himself in midair, he flew into a rage. Who was he? He was the great soul overlord of the soul demon universe, second only to one and above billions of people. How dare you knock me away? You're courting death, the black-robed man said coldly. The next moment, he raised his hand. A monstrous power of sin filled the air. Rumble! He turned into a bolt of lightning, fell from the sky, and struck Hades' era. Bam! Hades' era was smashed to the ground, creating a huge pit with smoke rising slowly from it. Bufang exhaled. The black-robed man held the hourglass in one hand and pointed at Bufang with the other. He flicked his finger. A black bolt of sinful lightning struck down. The space around Bufang's body twisted. Buzz! The thunderbolt was immediately deflected by Bufang. Boom! In the pit where Ha was, lightning appeared again and smashed into it. A miserable howl resounded, the corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. The group of people around him didn't know what to say. That slut, this is retribution. Marquis Langu, the peerless beast in the distance, clapped his hands excitedly. Who asked you to be more flirtatious than this Marquis? Who asked you to be more unrestrained than this Marquis? The black-robed man narrowed his eyes. Law of space, the black-robed man narrowed his eyes. He recognized at a glance that what Bufang had just displayed was the law of space. Using the law of space to divert his sinful lightning, he did have some tricks up his sleeve. You come from the Chaosverse, the black-robed man said. Bufang narrowed his eyes. The vermilion robe fluttered, and Bufang's figure hovered in the air. A chef from the Chaosverse. You remind me of someone. The black-robed man narrowed his scarlet eyes, which seemed to be swirling with a terrible aura. All chefs from the Chaosverse must die. Rumble! The black-robed man suddenly went berserk. This was beyond everyone's expectation. Bufang's body tensed. With a shake of his hand, a death spicy strip appeared in his hand, ready to block the black-robed man's path. The black-robed man was also a soul demon, so the death spicy strip must be useful. The moment the spicy strip appeared, bam! The black-robed man, who had just appeared in front of Bufang, was knocked flying again. Like a cannonball, he smashed into a building in the distance. The whole building trembled and collapsed in an instant. Spicy strip. Hades' era's hair stood on end. The law of life swirled around him, and he was unscathed. His eyes gleamed with excitement as he stared at Bufang. Rubble rolled down. In the ruins in the distance, the black-robed man, who had been knocked flying, floated up into the air with a suppressed aura. You're really courting death. Once again, he was sent flying. And it was the kind of collision that he did not expect at all. Yet, he did not die from his sinful lightning. He was even unscathed. This guy, Heaven God Life? The Heaven God of Life of the chaotic universe. The black-robed man really did not expect this. The chaotic universe, the universe that had been wiped out by Soul God with a palm, had given birth to a new Heaven God. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched as he looked at Hades' era, who would go crazy if he did not give him the spicy strip. Then, he handed the death spicy strip to the latter. Eat it. Bufang felt somewhat helpless. Hades' era took the spicy strip, grabbed the half-meter-long strip, and slowly stuffed it into his mouth. Then, he stuffed it into his mouth and kept twitching. His movements were unbearable to watch. Whoa! The death spicy strip was different from the spicy strips of the past. It could be called a dark cuisine, and the spicy strips of the past could not be compared to it. Hades' era's face turned red in an instant. His lips swelled up like two fat sausages in an instant. Oh, this feels good. Hades' era's eyes were misty as he enjoyed the delicacy of the spicy strip. In the distance, Master Jin Yong's mouth twitched. That was Owner Boo's dark cuisine, the death spicy strip. He almost died from eating it. But this guy actually looked like he was enjoying it. It was really infuriating to compare oneself with others. If he had this calmness, he would have obtained the chaotic energy long ago. The black-robed man was ignored. He was ignored by the heaven god life. Veins appeared on the palm holding the hourglass of time and space in the distance. Lord Go slapped down with his paw. The exquisite dog paw fell and slapped the head of the black-robed man's clone. With a bang, the doppelganger directly exploded. Although the clone's strength was not bad, Lord Go was heaven god time, who was even stronger than Era. How could a mere clone be able to hold him back? Lord Go strode forward with his elegant cat-like steps. Then, he slapped his paw at the black-robed man holding the hourglass of time and space. The dog paw kept growing bigger and bigger in midair, and finally turned into a huge claw that blotted out the sky. The law of time swirled around the paw. Boom! The black-robed man focused his eyes. With a flick of his finger, a black thunderbolt shot toward Lord Go's paw. Suddenly, they collided, and a violent explosion took place. Bufang's figure flickered, and he pulled Hades' era to the side. Soul Demon Army! Attack! A cold voice rang out in midair. The next moment, the countless soul demons behind him rushed into the battlefield. However, it was different from before. This time, the soul demons had learned their lesson. They divided into 3 fronts, one of which went straight for Bufang, and the other 2 turned into torrents and joined the army of the cavalry of death and the exiles. All of a sudden, the pressure on Master Jin Yong, Viscount Ash, and the others increased dramatically. Some of them even began to show signs of being routed. After all, they were not very strong. Marquis Langu, the great demon, roared and slapped one soul demon after another. His ferocity was on full display. Bufang's heart skipped a beat. One spicy strip after another emerged in front of him. The death spicy strip shot out. Suddenly, Hades' era's eyes lit up. Spicy strips. They're mine. They're all mine. Hades' era roared. Then, he soared into the sky, heading straight for the spicy strip. Lord Go and the black-robed man began to fight fiercely. The black-robed man was a great soul overlord. Lord Go did not have a good impression of a great soul overlord at all. Or rather, Lord Go did not have a good impression of soul demons. If it had not been for the soul demon's palm, the chaos space would have been destroyed. Even now, heaven gods like them would not have fallen into transmigration. Even now, heaven god space and heaven god destruction had not returned. Heaven god time? The black-robed man never thought that he would run into 2 heaven gods in Void City. A heaven god who was not weaker than a great soul overlord was really shocking to him. He had always thought that the chaotic universe had declined. Now it seemed that he was wrong. The entire soul demon universe was wrong. Were these 2 heaven gods the helpers of the chaotic universe's cursed goddesses? The black-robed man soared into the sky and fought Lord Go. The power of sin and the power of the laws kept colliding, causing explosions and rumbling sounds. Hades' era was addicted to spicy strips and could not help himself. Meanwhile, Bufang was facing an army of soul demons. The others, on the other hand, were at a disadvantage. The situation was reversed in an instant. In midair, Bufang's vermilion robe fluttered in the wind. Then, he flew out at high speed. He unleashed the 5 supreme laws of the universe, and dark cuisine hovered around him. Dark cuisine was the simplest and most effective way to deal with soul demons. Bufang shuttled through the army of soul demons. Wherever he passed, every soul demon he passed would spontaneously combust. These soul demons simply could not resist the delicious dark cuisine. Bam! 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 Bufang streaked across the sky like a shooting star, and the army of soul demons behind him exploded. It was a shocking scene. The nobles of Void City sucked in their breath. In the sky, cursed goddess Soul's face was livid. However, it would take Bufang some time to get rid of so many soul demons, and there were many things she could do during this time. She turned her eyes and rested them on you in the restaurant. Isn't that chef going to help you? If Nethery were to die, this chef would definitely lose his composure. At that time, no one can stop her. Come with me, Soul said. She looked at Pai Dong and Pai Shi, who were standing next to her. The brothers narrowed their eyes. Clad in their death armors, they nodded. Soul raised her hand. Her slender fingers were fair, and her nails were crystal clear. She pointed at the restaurant. Let's kill those two cursed goddesses, Soul said. Her words revealed enough confidence. Pai Dong and Pai Shi's eyes lit up. That's right. At this moment, the enemy's defenders have all attacked, leaving only the two cursed goddesses. You are only as strong as a mid-stage saint of the Great Path. As for Hutu, she's injured, but she's nothing to be afraid of. This is my best chance. Cursed goddess Soul grinned. Then, the three of them sped forward. She was holding a black orb in her hand, which was swirling with the power of sin. The three of them turned into three black shooting stars and sped toward the restaurant. Their targets were you and Hutu. Bufang slapped 2 copies of the Stargazy pie on the faces of the 2 soul overlords. He glanced at Soul and Pai Dong and Pai Shi, who were rushing toward the restaurant, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Marquis Lang Gu roared. The expressions of Viscount Ash and Master Zhen Yong changed dramatically. If the 2 cursed goddesses were injured, everything they had done would be in vain. Countess Xiaqiu, Countess Adong, and Countess Luming were held back by Marchioness Ruoshui and the other experts. For a moment, they couldn't do anything. Countess Xiaqiu's eyes were filled with worry. What should we do? Nether King Ha's eyes focused, and he stopped pulling the spicy strip. Then, he kicked the ground with the tip of his foot and shot forward, heading straight for the restaurant. Although the chili gluten was delicious, he still understood the importance of the matter. Rumble! Pai Dong and Pai Shi landed, drew their black bows, and shot toward Hutu. Hutu focused her eyes and pointed the bow of bliss at the black bow. On the other side, cursed goddess Soul had landed. After stepping into the chaotic saint level, her fighting prowess was extraordinary. Countless sinful forces spread out of the black ball and tried to entangle you. Die! Cursed goddess Soul and Pai Dong and Pai Shi shouted at the same time. Slash! Suddenly Pai Dong and Pai Shi shot their arrows. Nether King Ha's figure appeared. Puff! The arrow pierced Era's body and pushed Era 2 steps back. Beauty! I'm here. Don't be afraid. Era turned to look at Hutu with a spicy strip in his mouth, and said in a deep voice. Slash! Hutu could not hold back, and the bow of bliss flew out of her hand. I rumble! Xiao Ai stood in front of you, her eyes full of determination. Little Hu, who was playing dead in Yu's arms, jumped up as well. Your Excellency Nethery, run. Xiao Ai's eyes were filled with determination. Run? If you can't, you'll all stay here, Soul said indifferently. Cursed goddess Soul said indifferently. Her eyes narrowed. She looked into the depths of the restaurant. There, a mechanical voice rang out. Troublemakers will be stripped as an example to others. Troublemakers will be stripped in public. Rumble! A purple beam shot out. Cursed goddess Soul held her breath. Then, a huge palm appeared as if it had teleported, grabbed her head, and pressed her to the ground. Then, a palm leaf fan-like palm appeared as if it had teleported, grabbed her head, and ruthlessly pressed her to the ground. Chapter 1764. Rumble. It never occurred to Sol that there would be a powerhouse in the restaurant. When that fan-like palm appeared, she subconsciously wanted to dodge it. Even the black ball in her hand had unleashed its energy to defend against it. However, she could not defend against it. This fan-like palm had easily and casually broken through her energy defense, directly smashing into her face, and fiercely pressing her entire body to the ground. That rude behavior was like that of a violent beast. Cursed goddess Sol could even feel that her tall nose was being flattened. The restaurant's floor was extremely hard, and Sol felt her head shake. She was a chaotic saint, and her fleshly body was so strong that even the explosion of a planet could not hurt her. However, at this moment, it was not as hard as the restaurant's floor. Xiao Bai. No. Lord Bai. Xiao Ai had almost despaired. She thought she was going to die, mainly because Sol's aura was too terrifying, even more so than that of a soul demon. However, now, all the danger was gone. Xiao Bai's appearance made Xiao Ai so excited that her heart almost jumped out of her throat. She swore that from today on, she would be Lord Bai's little fan. The corner of Yu's mouth twitched slightly. In Bufang's restaurant, she was basically safe. She could not believe that Sol wanted to deal with her in the restaurant. She was really a little stupid. In her arms, little Hu, who had been vigilant, relaxed a little. His fur drooped as he burped. However, he rolled his eyes. There was a flash of golden light. Little Hu jumped up and landed on Xiaopi's shoulder. With a ripping sound, he shot out of the restaurant. The bubbles in Xiaopi's mouth burst, and then his body grew bigger and bigger. Finally, he grew to the size of a black dragon. On Xiaopi's back, Little Hu's body had almost turned into a dot. At the same time, Little Hu's body turned blood-red, and his 9 tails swayed and lashed at the void. Energy gathered in her mouth, and she opened it wide and let out a shrill cry. Screech! Golden light shone in all directions. Little Hu locked his gaze on the army in the distance. He opened his mouth. Da-da-da-da-da, as the blue light shot out, a golden stream of light rapidly shot out. They turned into arcs and charged towards the huge army in the distance. One of the soul demons opened his mouth wide and approached Viscount Ash. However, before he could make a move, a golden soul demon meatball approached and exploded. The soul demon's upper body was blown to pieces. As the wind blew, Viscount Ash's clothes fluttered in the wind. Viscount Ash was dumbfounded. She turned her head and looked at the gigantic mantis shrimp and Little Hu. Was he really that strong? Are all the people in that restaurant freaks? A chef had suppressed an army of soul demons. The puppet subdued cursed goddess Sol with one move. Now even pets were so freaking powerful. Who said that Lord Nethery's power was weak? This kind of force was unbelievably powerful. Countess Xiaqiu laughed. She stepped on her black dragon, which spewed flames from its mouth and incinerated all the exiles. The situation seemed to have reversed in an instant. Little Hu kept shooting soul demon meatballs out of his mouth. Sol's army was actually suppressed by the powerful firepower. In front of the restaurant, for a moment, the atmosphere was a little awkward. Hades' Era looked at Hutu with a spicy strip dangling from his mouth. This king used his body to block an arrow for you. Why did you shoot this king's but with an arrow? Hades' Era looked at Hutu and said helplessly. Hutu looked a little embarrassed. She did not expect Hades' Era to block the arrow with his body. However, it was her fault that she still shot the arrow when she saw Era. But she could not be blamed. This guy was too coquettish. He had scared her. Hutu thought to herself, I won't take the blame for this. Hades' Era pulled the arrow out of his butt. Then, he turned his eyes to Pai Dong and Pai Shi in the distance. He raised a hand, pointed at the black arrow in his chest, and said, You two are very naughty, aren't you? You shot my heart with an arrow. Do you have a crush on me? Pai Dong and Pai Shi looked at each other, their brows furrowed. Ignore this guy. Let's finish this quickly. Pai Dong said. Then, they shot forward in an instant. Boom! Their bodies jerked forward. Pai Dong drew his bow, and Pai Shi shot the arrow. Hades' arrow raised his eyebrows slightly. Slash! The black arrow shot out again. It tore through the air and sped toward Hades' arrow. The arrowhead seemed to be enlarging, and its shaft was trembling, producing a faint sonic boom. The arrow was about to bypass Hades' arrow and go straight to Hutu. Hutu drew her bow and frowned. Suddenly, she froze again. Slash! The sound of an arrow piercing flesh rang out. Hutu looked at Hades' arrow, who stood in front of her, not knowing what to say. The arrow pierced Hades' arrow's chest again. "Beauty, I don't mind if you shoot my butt, but you can't do it again," Hades' arrow said solemnly. Hutu was speechless. Is this guy stupid? Pai Dong and Pai Shi were also stunned. It was the first time they saw such a shameless man. How could he pick up girls in such a situation? Shoot! Shoot him to death! Pai Dong said, gritting his teeth. Buzz! Buzz! Pai Dong and Pai Shi shot 3 arrows in a row. Each arrow had the terrifying power to pierce through a star. Wasn't that slut good at blocking arrows? She was good at blocking arrows with her body. Then, keep blocking. They wanted to see how many arrows this guy could block. Slash! 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 Nether King Ha stood at his spot, his body trembling uncontrollably. At the same time, he unhurriedly pulled out the spicy strip. Occasionally, he would twist his waist to block the arrows that the other side shot. Pai Dong and Pai Shi were panting. Hades' arrow's body was already full of arrows. What the F***ck? Pai Dong was furious. Why couldn't this guy die? The corner of Hutu's mouth twitched. He was really despicable. My 2 brothers, you've shot a total of 326 arrows. You've shot 100 arrows into my little heart. Tell me, do you like me? Hades' arrow said in a deep voice with a spicy strip dangling from his mouth. Big brother! I can't stand it anymore. Pai Shi roared, his face livid. He took a step forward. The curse power exploded, turning into a beam of light that shot toward Hades' arrow. They were no match for him in terms of being despicable. Slash! Hades' arrow's eyes narrowed. The law of life revolved around him, and the arrows that had pierced his body were knocked away. Pai Dong and Pai Shi no longer used arrows. They fought with their bare hands. However, this was perhaps the worst decision they had ever made. Hades' arrow was the heavenly life god. He was equivalent to a Duke-level expert. The 2 of them were no match for him. Boom! With a spicy strip dangling from his mouth, Hades' arrow kicked Pai Dong away. As for Pai Shi, he was pressed against the wall of the restaurant. Are you still naughty? Nether King Ha held a spicy strip in his mouth as he said gloomily. Buzz puff! A shockwave erupted. Hades' arrow's pupils constricted. His hair fluttered in the wind. In the next instant, he found that Pai Shi, who was pressed against the wall, had his head pierced by an arrow. Even before his death, Pai Shi's eyes were filled with reluctance. Pai Shi's soul floated out. Hutu knocked an arrow, and the bow of bliss whistled through the air. The arrow pierced the soul and exploded it. A chaotic saint had fallen. Nether King Ha held the spicy strip between his lips, dumbstruck. How could this woman be so tough? Hutu's face was indifferent as she waved the bow of bliss at Hades' arrow. In the distance, Pai Dong crawled to his feet, and his eyes instantly turned red. When the 2 brothers worked together, they could fight a marquis, but when separated, they were only at the level of an ordinary chaotic saint. Anger exploded in Pai Dong's eyes. However, with a boom, he was hit by a figure. Soul scrambled to her feet, her hair disheveled. Her hair was disheveled, and blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Your Excellency Soul, Pai Dong's eyes were full of anger. Plan failed. Retreat. Cursed goddess, Soul shouted. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flashed as she walked out step by step. Every step she took caused her heart to tremble in fear. The curse power erupted, and she wanted to rush out of the restaurant. But a palm fan-like palm suddenly appeared and grabbed her calf. Her body was once again swung around. She hit the wall of the restaurant with a thud, letting out a muffled grunt. In Xiao Bai's magic forbidding domain, she could not resist at all. Damn it! Cursed Goddess Soul's anger surged. The little girl sat in a chair, swinging her fair legs as she watched Whitey crush Cursed Goddess Soul with a gleam in her eyes. Xiao Ai clapped her hands excitedly. Nethery calmly looked at them. Let go of Her Excellency Soul. Pai Dong suppressed the grief in his heart and rushed to his feet. However, he was slapped away by Xiao Bai and smashed into the wall. In midair, Soul, who was being smashed by Whitey, had a ferocious look in her eyes. Suddenly, her heart sank. She found that in the distance, Hutu was knocking the bow of bliss and aiming at her. A chill rose in her heart. With a long cry, Soul slipped out of Xiao Bai's hand, fell to the ground and bounced to her feet. A whistling sound rang out. An arrow shot out of the bow of bliss, chasing after Soul. Cursed Goddess Soul leaped out of the restaurant. Pai Dong followed. However, the bow of bliss kept chasing after Soul. Damn it! The primitive divine artifact of the primitive universe is really tricky. Cursed Goddess Soul turned her eyes. Then, a black ball emerged in her hand. She could not use it when facing Xiao Bai, but now that she was out of Xiao Bai's domain, she could use it. Inside the sphere, black energy came out and wrapped around the arrow. The arrow was instantly corroded into nothingness. Pai Dong and Cursed Goddess Soul managed to escape in a panic. When they landed in midair, their faces were livid. They had wanted to launch a sneak attack, but it had failed, and Pai Shi had died. She glanced over her shoulder and saw that the situation had reached a stalemate. With Little Hu's firepower support, the army could not break through the defense line for a while. Damn it! Cursed Goddess Soul's eyes were filled with coldness. Rumble! The last soul demon was enveloped by a scarlet flame. Bufang shook his hands, patted his clothes, and breathed a soft sigh of relief. Bufang turned to look at Soul in the distance. I've told you, I'm as strong as an army. Do you believe me now? Soul's eyes were extremely cold. Her hair was disheveled, and she looked a little flustered. Bufang's words made her face very unsightly. Suddenly, Cursed Goddess Soul smiled. Do you think you have a chance to turn the tables? In the distance, the black-robed man, who was fighting the Lord Go, knocked the Lord Go away with one move. He grabbed the hourglass and appeared behind Cursed Goddess Soul in a flash. Envy Great Soul Overlord. Do it. Soul said, glancing at the black-robed man. The black-robed man nodded. The Lord Go landed beside Bufang. The situation reached a stalemate. Everyone turned to look at Cursed Goddess Soul in the distance with a grave expression. The black-robed man's scarlet eyes narrowed. The next moment, he raised the hourglass in his hand. The golden sand in the hourglass finally stopped flowing. When the last grain of sand fell, the hourglass of time and space suddenly burst into a dazzling light. The space-time barrier of Void City was torn apart. Rumble! A terrible power of sin swept out through the hourglass. Amidst the dazzling light, a terrifying fissure was torn open. Terrible power of sin filled the air behind it. A huge palm pressed against the edge of the rift, and with a ripping sound, the rift was ripped open. Suddenly, two great soul overlords rushed out of it. Behind the two great soul overlords was an army of soul demons from the soul demon universe. They were well equipped and their auras fluctuated. The explosion of the hourglass had attracted an army of soul demons from the soul demon universe. A real army of soul demons. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.